Chapter 3179, Great Yin Empire. This was a vast and resource-rich super-divine nation. At the same time, it was also the northernmost empire in the Tianbei region. It had been tens of thousands of years since the Great Yin Empire was established. It could be said that its foundation was extremely strong. There were 18 subsidiary divine nations under its command and hundreds of billions of people. The Great Yin Empire was located in the center, and the 18 divine nations surrounded it, forming a protective formation. As for the Great Yin Empire's territory, it was about 5 times the size of the Bloodfire Divine Nation and more than 4 times the Raging Flame Divine Nation. Until now, the Great Yin Empire had 78 counties, thousands of main cities, and tens of thousands of strategic towns. The Yin royal family that ruled the empire had been passed down for more than 50,000 years and was a veritable ancient noble family. The Yin bloodline was very noble and powerful. In terms of grade, it could reach the supreme grade monarch level and was very close to the quasi-king level. As long as one was a descendant of the Yin family, as long as one did not have any congenital defects and had normal aptitude and comprehension, one could basically become a high-rank godly lord. In fact, some extremely talented geniuses even had a glimmer of hope to become an unparalleled godly king. It was a pity that since ancient times, the Yin family had only produced one godly king. That was more than 40,000 years ago, and that godly king expert had long disappeared without a trace. Ever since the Great Yin Empire was established, the Yin family had had a great goal since the first emperor. That was to nurture an unparalleled godly king. Only then could they lead the Great Yin Empire to the peak, crush the other empires, and laugh proudly in the Tianbei region. However, this wish had never been realized. For 30,000 years, the Yin royal family had never produced a godly king expert. The strongest were only the previous emperors. They had all reached the limit of the Divine Lord realm and were only one step away from becoming a godly king. However, that one step was like a natural chasm that could not be crossed. After the previous emperors passed down the throne, they focused on cultivating in seclusion and worked hard to break through to the godly king realm. However, there were 3 old emperors who had cultivated for thousands of years and still could not break through. They lost the patience to cultivate in seclusion and left the Great Yin Empire to travel the boundless heaven continent in search of opportunities to break through. No one knew if they succeeded or if they died outside. In short, there was no news of those old emperors. Until now, only the previous emperor and the emperor before that were still in seclusion in the Great Yin Empire. The previous emperor was the father of the current emperor of Great Yin. He was known as the retired emperor. The previous emperor was the grandfather of Great Yin's emperor. He was known as the patriarch. The Great Yin Empire had also recruited many talented people, crouching tigers, and hidden dragons. It was unknown how many top-notch high-ranked divine lords they had recruited. Even the young emperor of Great Yin was a 9th stage higher divine lord. His strength was slightly stronger than princely Yin's. At this moment, the capital of Great Yin, which covered an area of 1,000 miles, was shrouded in the darkness of the night. Great Yin's imperial capital was extremely prosperous. More than 15 million Protoss citizens lived there. Even though it was late at night, the imperial capital was still brightly lit and the streets were bustling with people. Therefore, Great Yin's capital was known as the Nightless City. This was also a place of pilgrimage for the surrounding 18 divine nations. It was the highest level divine, Tao Holy Land. At this moment, the imperial palace in Great Yin's capital was still as dazzling and magnificent as ever. Deep in the palace, in a grand and luxurious study, a young man dressed in a 5-clawed golden dragon robe and a crown with 9 dragons on his head was sitting behind a divine jade desk. He was resting with his eyes closed. This tall and burly young man was dark red in color. He had the majestic and domineering air of a king. He was the current leader of the Yin family. He was Yin Yongning, the current emperor of the Great Yin Empire. Hundreds of memorials and jade slips were piled into a small mountain on the desk in front of him. Countless affairs of the empire were waiting for him to deal with. It looked like he was tired, so he closed his eyes and rested for a while. However, in truth, he was a ninth-stage divine lord. He would not have any problems even if he did not eat, drink, or rest for 100 years. At this moment, he was listening to a black-robed man's report. The black-robed middle-aged man was shrouded in black mist. His face could not be seen clearly, and he seemed exceptionally mysterious. Moreover, his strength was also at the ninth-stage divine lord realm. His foundation was even stronger than Great Yan's emperor. This was the governor of Black Flame. He was also one of Great Yan's emperor's most trusted aides. After all, Black Flame was an intelligence organization of Great Yan's imperial family. It was responsible for investigating and monitoring the movements of the 18 divine nations. The Black Flame governor bowed respectfully and said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, I've sent people to check repeatedly. The news from the Blood Flame divine nations and Raging Flame divine nations is indeed true. The foreign youth named Tianxing went all the way south from the Blood Flame divine nation. He was unstoppable and created miracles time and time again. His battle record is very exaggerated. Now, that person has left Raging Flame capital and is rushing toward the Empire's border. He should be entering the Empire soon." The Black Flame governor had reported a lot of information before. These few sentences were just a summary. The Emperor was silent for a moment. He did not comment. Instead, he asked, "What about Old Eighth? He was defeated so miserably. He should be running back like a stray dog, right?" The Old Eighth he was referring to was the 8th prince, who was the current Prince Lien. The Black Flame governor said calmly, "Prince Lien left Raging Flame capital on the night of the final battle and returned to the Empire. Just last night, he returned to the Empire with his followers and confidants." According to the informants at the border, Prince Lien did not seem to be returning to the imperial capital. He seemed to be heading toward the heavenly sect. The Emperor sneered and said, No matter how big the imperial capital is, it is not his home. Although the 8th prince's mansion is still there, it is covered with dust and has been abandoned. How can he come back? Now, other than the Heavenly Union sect, where else can he go?" The Black Flame governor did not comment on this. He just asked calmly, "Your Majesty, please make a decision. How should we deal with Prince Lien?" The Emperor leaned back on the divine jade chair and sneered mockingly. "Old Eighth has been defeated so miserably. Let him hide and recuperate for a few years. He is still too inexperienced. He thinks he is doing things secretly, but how can he escape from my eyes? When I sent him to the Blood Flame divine nation, I guessed that he was harboring evil intentions and plotting revenge. When he was gathering forces in the various divine nations and building a team, I pretended not to know and turn a blind eye. After all, those forces are not strong enough to threaten me. I just ascended the throne not long ago, and I just killed Old Fourth and their mother. If I punish Old Eighth, the people will scold me for being heartless and cold-blooded. I didn't expect that a young man from another race called Tianxing would suddenly appear and have a conflict with Old Eighth. Moreover, that kid is so brave that he actually destroyed Old Eighth's force and defeated him so miserably. Speaking of which, I have to thank that kid for eliminating Old Eighth's force for me." The Black Flame governor understood the Emperor's meaning and asked again, "How do you plan to deal with that kid, Your Majesty?" The Emperor frowned and said in a deep voice, "I don't want to deal with him, but the Great Yin Empire does not welcome him." Chapter 3180. Ji Tianxing knew that it was unlikely that Grand Prince Lien was still in Yunwu Pass. However, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack for him to kill Grand Prince Lien now. Under such circumstances, he had to try as long as there was a slight possibility. Otherwise, he would regret it if he missed the best chance to kill Grand Prince Lien. Swoosh! Ji Tianxing flew across the night sky, and soon he had traveled 500 miles and arrived at the Cloud Mist Pass. There was a deep canyon in front of him. It was filled with towering trees and thick clouds. On both sides of the mountain were 3,000 feet tall, extremely steep and dangerous. However, the two mountains were not far from each other. They were only about 100 miles apart. The soldiers of the Great Yin Empire had built a floating city at the peak of the two mountains to connect the two mountains. The floating city, floating in the sea of clouds, was only 100 miles in radius, but looked very prosperous with many palaces and tall buildings. There were also flat, open spaces on both sides of the mountains. Barracks and armory were built. 180,000 border soldiers were stationed in the barracks and the floating city. Even though it was late at night, there were many soldiers patrolling around the floating city. The city was still lit. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing used his invisibility divine ability and flew silently toward the floating city. What surprised him was that the floating city and the two barracks were protected by Supreme Monarch-level divine arrays. The defense divine array of the floating city was fully activated. It shone brilliantly in the night sky. He had to break the divine array if he wanted to enter the floating city. Therefore, he did not waste any time. He dodged a few patrolling soldiers and started to break the divine array. It was not difficult for him to break the Supreme Monarch-level divine array, but it would take a long time. Moreover, he had to keep using his divine power while breaking the divine array. It was difficult to hide. Half an hour passed. Ji Tianxing finally broke the divine array and tore a hole in the five-colored light shield. He had just passed through the hole and entered the floating city when he saw a large number of soldiers gathered in the open space in front of him. There were more than 1,000 elite black-armored soldiers led by 4 low-rank divine lords. They were in a neat formation and were waiting for him. At the front of the battle formation, there were 3 powerhouses who were also staring at him coldly. He was an upper divine monarch in armor, and his strength had reached the 7th heaven realm. He looked like a general guarding the cloud mist pass. The other 2 high-level monarchs were dressed in luxurious robes, and they exuded a dignified and noble aura. Their strength had also reached the 8th degree realm. It was obvious that Ji Tianxing had exposed himself and was discovered by the other party. Could it be that another battle was about to break out? Ji Tianxing thought to himself. He was not afraid of fighting. If they really fought, he could destroy the entire Yunwu Pass within 2 hours, wiping out hundreds of thousands of soldiers. However, was there a need to start a massacre? If he really killed the 180,000 soldiers of Cloud Mist Pass, the Emperor of Great Yin would definitely fly into a rage and order everyone to surround and annihilate him. Thinking of this, Ji Tianxing decided not to make a move first and act according to the circumstances. At this moment, the 2 powerhouses in luxurious robes in the lead spoke first. An old man with white hair and a beard looked at Ji Tianxing expressionlessly and said, "If I'm not mistaken, you're Tianxing, aren't you?" Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and asked, "The 2 of you don't look like the guards of Cloud Mist Pass. You look more like you're waiting for me here." The other middle-aged man nodded and said with a faint smile, "You're smart to be able to guess this. To tell you the truth, Elder Yuan and I are His Majesty's Imperial envoys. We were ordered to wait for you here and pass on a message to you." Realization dawned on Ji Tianxing. At the same time, more questions appeared in his mind. Great Yan's Imperial envoys? They've been waiting for me here? He frowned. He had a bad feeling about this. After all, he had caused an earth-shattering battle in the Blood Flame and Raging Flame divine nations. He had even killed the Blood Flame divine sovereign. The Great Yin Emperor had eyes and ears all over the divine nations. He must have known the truth long ago. However, the Great Yin Emperor had never asked about it and pretended not to know anything. Now that he had come to Cloud Mist Pass, the Great Yin Emperor had sent someone to wait for him here and pass on a message. No matter how he looked at it, this was not good news. As expected, the white-bearded old man stared at Ji Tianxing and said in a dignified tone, "Tianxing, the matter between you and Prince Lian is a personal grudge. You caused such a huge commotion in the Blood Flame and Raging Flame divine nations. It's also a matter between you and the 2 divine nations. His Majesty is well aware of all this, but he didn't interfere. This is because His Majesty is a benevolent and righteous ruler. He only protects the citizens of the Great Yin Empire and won't interfere with the internal affairs of the other divine nations. However, it's impossible for you to break into Cloud Mist Pass and even enter the Great Yin Empire tonight. His Majesty has said that you're not welcome in the Great Yin Empire. Please leave, the middle-aged man said in a dignified tone. Tianxing, no matter how powerful you are or how bloodthirsty you are, His Majesty can ignore you as long as you don't threaten the Great Yin Empire. However, if you enter the Great Yin Empire, you'll endanger the safety of the citizens. This is not allowed. I hope you know your place. Don't step into the Great Yin Empire and don't challenge His Majesty's authority. Otherwise, you'll suffer His Majesty's wrath and face the encirclement of the entire empire. You'd better think about it carefully. The two imperial envoys' tone was unfriendly and their expressions were arrogant. However, they were here on behalf of the Great Yin Emperor. Naturally, they had to be imposing and not tarnish the Great Yin Emperor's reputation. Moreover, they did not say anything overboard. Ji Tianxing was not angry. He had expected this outcome. He sneered and said, "In that case, please tell the Great Yin Emperor that I won't harm the citizens of the Great Yin Empire. I'm only here to hunt down Prince Lien. I'm getting rid of an evil for the people and also helping the Great Yin Emperor resolve one of his worries." Upon hearing this, the expressions of the two imperial envoys and the divine general changed. They looked furious. "Bastard, how dare you criticize His Majesty?" The golden-armored divine general shouted angrily. The two imperial envoys' expressions darkened as well. They said coldly, "Brat, do you know the consequences of slandering His Majesty?" Tianxing, no matter how you quibble or plead for mercy, His Majesty's decree cannot be changed. If you know what's good for you, turn around and leave now. Don't even think about taking half a step into the Great Yin Empire. Ji Tianxing's smile became even more mocking. He nodded and said, "It seems like you know about the grudge between Prince Lien and Great Yan's Emperor. Otherwise, why would you be so angry? In that case, I only have one question. If you give me an answer, I'll turn around and leave." The two imperial envoys fell silent. After a brief discussion, the white-bearded old man said, "Ask whatever you want. However, whether we're willing to answer is our business." Ji Tianxing did not beat around the bush. He asked directly, "Is Prince Lien at Yunwu Pass? Did he pass by this place? Which direction did he go?" This question shouldn't make things difficult for you. In fact, you should be happy to hear it. The fastest mobile version of the website. Chapter 3181. The rock which Commandery Princess thought that Ji Tianxing had other intentions. It was either to rob or to kill. After all, this person was known as the Killing God. The rock which Commandery Princess naturally thought that it was related to killing. Who knew that Ji Tianxing's request would be so simple? He just wanted to borrow the teleportation formation. Hearing this, the rock Magus Infanta relaxed. Her heart that had been hanging in the air also calmed down. He let out a long sigh and a smile appeared on his face. He said politely, "Aha, so it's about this. I thought it was something else. Mr. Tianxing, don't worry. How can I not help you with such a small matter? Do you want to use it now or when? How about this? Since it's your first time in the Rockwitch Commandery, as the host, I have to be a good host and treat you well." The last sentence was, of course, a meaningless courtesy. The Rockwitch Commandery Princess's real thoughts were that she wanted this killing god to leave quickly. How could she waste any more time with him? However, she cannot show it. She was very cautious in front of Ji Tianxing. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing's reply allowed him to heave a sigh of relief. "Don't waste any more time. I will leave now." The Rockwitch Commandery Princess finally confirmed that Ji Tianxing only had this request and no other purpose. She was completely relieved. Without hesitation, she opened the door of the secret chamber and led Ji Tianxing out of the secret chamber. "Mr. Tianxing, please follow me." Then, the two of them passed through the dark tunnel and entered the center of the underground palace. They entered a spacious hall. There were 8 lower divine lords guarding the hall. They were all cultivating in their own secret chambers. Once someone approached the hall, the 8 divine lords would be awakened. Although they did not know Ji Tianxing, they saw the Rockwitch Commandery Princess leading Ji Tianxing into the hall. Then, They stayed in the secret chamber and did not move. The dark hall was silent. There was only a large formation on the ground in the middle of the hall. The Rock Witch Commandery Princess walked to the center of the formation and personally cast a spell to activate the formation. Soon, a white door of light that was more than 10 feet tall appeared in the middle of the formation. Rock Magus Countess finished casting the spell and bowed to Ji Tianxing. She said, "Young Master Tianxing, the teleportation divine formation has been opened. It can reach Shangliu City at the border." Ji Tianxing nodded. He stepped into the formation and walked into the teleportation gate. Shwa! With a flash of white light, Ji Tianxing's figure disappeared into the light gate. Seeing that he had really left, the Rock Witch Infanta's tense nerves relaxed. She let out a long breath and wiped the cold on her forehead. Phew! Fortunately, this death god only wanted to borrow the teleportation array and had no other intentions. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. After muttering to himself, he began to close the teleportation divine array. When he left the hall, he muttered to himself, "Although this god of death strength is unfathomable, his nature doesn't seem to be as cruel as the rumors say." The distance between Rockwitch County City and Willow City was tens of millions of miles. With Ji Tianxing's speed, he would need to fly for at least 3 days to arrive. However, using the teleportation divine array, he only needed a breath's time to arrive. When he appeared in Willow City, he was standing in an underground palace. There were several hundred guards standing guard around the palace, and there was even a lower divine lord overseeing it. When everyone saw Ji Tianxing suddenly appear, they were all stunned for a moment. Then they surrounded him. Vigilantly, they gripped their swords and blades, staring at Ji Tianxing fiercely. Once Ji Tianxing showed hostility and killing intent, they would not hesitate to attack. If Ji Tianxing showed any signs of cowardice, fear, or guilt, they would surround him and capture him. However, Ji Tianxing ignored them and left the underground palace expressionlessly. He used the teleportation technique and left Willow City in a flash. He continued to fly towards the south. The hundreds of guards in the underground palace all looked at each other in dismay, their hearts filled with doubt. A guard captain plucked up his courage and asked the low-level divine lord, "Commander, who was that foreign race kid? Why didn't we stop him and interrogate him?" The low-level divine lord glared at him and shouted coldly, "Are you out of your mind? That person's strength is unfathomable. Do you want to die? Moreover, he came from Rockwitch County City. He must have been approved by the princess. Why do we need to interrogate him?" The guard captain shrunk his neck and quickly apologized. Not long after, Ji Tianxing left Rockwitch County City. 3 days later, he arrived at Kushingnan County City. This time, he did the same thing. He quietly broke into the princess's mansion to borrow the teleportation divine array. To his surprise, the princess was not in the mansion. He did not know where she had gone to do some errands. The person with the highest status in the princess's mansion was the princess's son. He was a frivolous and dissolute playboy. Ji Tianxing used a little trick to capture the princess's son. He was so scared that he almost wet his pants. He did not even say his name, but the princess's son was so scared that he begged for mercy and agreed to open the teleportation divine array. This made things even simpler. Ji Tianxing carried the princess's son and entered the underground hall. The princess's son ordered the guards guarding the altar to activate the divine teleportation array as soon as possible. After a while, the teleportation divine array was opened. Ji Tianxing let go of the princess's son and left. Just like that, he quickly left Kushingnan County and continued to rush towards the south. In the next few days, he passed through a few counties and used the same method. The princess of each county was intimidated by his name. They did not even dare to resist or call for help. The few princesses' son sensibly opened the teleportation divine array and sent him off respectfully. Unknowingly, 10 days passed. On the 10th night, Ji Tianxing finally left the raging flame divine nation and stepped onto the border of the great Yin Empire. What appeared in front of him was a boundless and majestic mountain range. One after another, giant peaks, more than 2,000 feet tall, stood on the ground. Half of the mountain was shrouded in clouds and mist. This was the border between the raging flame divine nation and the great Yin Empire, the famous Cloud Mountain Range. 500 miles in front of Tianxing was the Cloud Mountain Pass, the northern border of the great Yin Empire. More than 100,000 soldiers were stationed there, and there were high-level divine lords guarding it. Tianxing flew through the night sky at a moderate speed and rushed towards the Cloud Mountain Pass. Along the way, he was still thinking to himself, Prince Lien should have used the teleportation divine arrays in the various counties to escape the raging flame divine nation. He left 2 hours earlier than me, and I did not waste any time. I should not be far from him. Given his mentality, he should be relaxed after escaping the raging flame divine nation and finally entering the great Yin Empire. The Cloud Mountain Pass was guarded by a large army and high-level divine lords. It could be said that it was very safe. He should have escaped into the Cloud Mountain Pass and used the teleportation divine array there to return to the great Yin Empire. I have to go to the Cloud Mountain Pass to investigate. If he has not left, that would be great. Even if he has already left the Cloud Mountain Pass, I can still find out where he went. Chapter 3182. Tianxing knew that it was unlikely that Grand Prince Lien was still in Yunwu Pass. However, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack for him to kill Grand Prince Lien now. Under such circumstances, he had to try as long as there was a slight possibility. Otherwise, he would regret it if he missed the best chance to kill Grand Prince Lien. Swoosh! Tianxing flew across the night sky, and soon he had traveled 500 miles and arrived at the Cloud Mist Pass. There was a deep canyon in front of him. It was filled with towering trees and thick clouds. On both sides of the mountain were 3,000 feet tall, extremely steep and dangerous. However, the two mountains were not far apart, only about 100 miles apart. The soldiers of the great Yin Empire had built a floating city at the peak of the two mountains to connect the two mountains. The floating city, floating in the sea of clouds, was only 100 miles in radius, but it looked very prosperous with many palaces and tall buildings. There were also flat, open spaces on both sides of the mountains. Barracks and armory were built. 180,000 border soldiers were stationed in the barracks and the floating city. Although it was late at night, there were still many soldiers patrolling around the floating city. The city was still lit. Seeing this, Tianxing used his invisibility divine ability and flew toward the floating city silently. What surprised him was that the floating city and the two barracks were protected by Supreme Monarch-level divine arrays. The defense divine array of the floating city was fully activated. It shone with dazzling divine light in the night sky. He had to break the divine array if he wanted to enter the floating city. Therefore, he did not waste any time. He dodged a few patrolling soldiers and started to break the divine array. It was not difficult for him to break the Supreme Monarch-level divine array, but it would take him a long time. Moreover, he had to keep using his divine power while breaking the divine array. It was difficult to hide. Half an hour passed. Tianxing finally broke the divine array and tore a hole in the five-colored light shield. He had just passed through the hole and entered the floating city when he saw a large number of soldiers gathered in the open space in front of him. There were thousands of elite black-armored soldiers led by 4 low-rank divine lords. They were in a neat formation and were waiting for him. There were 3 powerhouses at the front of the battle formation. They were also staring at him coldly. One of them was a high-ranked divine lord in armor. His strength was at the 7th heaven realm. He looked like a general guarding Yunwu Pass. The other 2 high-ranked divine lords were dressed in luxurious robes. They exuded a dignified and noble aura. Their strength was at the 8th heaven realm. It was obvious that Tianxing had exposed himself and was discovered by the enemy. Was he going to have to fight another battle? Tianxing thought to himself. He wasn't afraid of fighting. If a fight really broke out, he could destroy the entire Yunwu Pass within 2 hours, wiping out hundreds of thousands of soldiers. However, was there a need to kill them all? If he really killed the 180,000 soldiers of Cloud Mist Pass, the great Yin Emperor would definitely fly into a rage and order all forces to surround and annihilate him. Thinking of this, Tianxing decided not to make a move first and act according to the circumstances. At this moment, the two powerhouses in luxurious robes in the lead spoke first. A white-haired old man from the God clan looked at Ji Tianxing expressionlessly and said, "If I'm not mistaken, you're Tianxing, aren't you?" Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and asked, "The two of you don't look like the guards of Yunwu Pass. Are you waiting for me here?" The other middle-aged man nodded and said with a smile, "You're smart to be able to guess this. To tell you the truth, Elder Yuan and I are His Majesty's Imperial envoys. We were ordered to wait for you here and pass on a message to you." Realization dawned on Ji Tianxing. At the same time, more questions appeared in his mind. Great Yan's Emperor's Imperial envoys? They're waiting for me here? He frowned. He had a bad feeling about this. After all, he had caused an earth-shattering battle in the Blood Flame and Raging Flame divine nations. He had even killed the Blood Flame divine sovereign. The Great Yin Emperor had eyes and ears all over the divine nations. He must have known the truth long ago. However, the Great Yin Emperor had never asked about it and pretended not to know anything. Now that he had come to Yunwu Pass, the Great Yin Emperor had sent someone to wait for him here and pass on a message. No matter how he looked at it, this was not good news. As expected, the white-haired old man stared at Ji Tianxing and said in a dignified tone, "Tianxing, the matter between you and Prince Lian is a personal grudge. You caused such a huge commotion in the Blood Flame and Raging Flame divine nations. It's also a matter between you and the two divine nations. His Majesty is well aware of all this, but he didn't interfere. His Majesty is a benevolent and righteous ruler. He only protects the citizens of the Great Yin Empire and won't interfere with the internal affairs of the other divine nations. However, it's impossible for you to break into Yunwu Pass and even step into the Great Yin Empire tonight. His Majesty has said that you're not welcome in the Great Yin Empire. Please leave." The middle-aged man said in a dignified tone, "Tianxing, no matter how powerful you are or how bloodthirsty you are, His Majesty can ignore you as long as you don't threaten the Great Yin Empire. However, if you enter the Great Yin Empire, you'll endanger the safety of the citizens. This is unacceptable. I hope you know your place. Don't step into the Great Yin Empire and don't challenge His Majesty's authority. Otherwise, you'll have to bear His Majesty's wrath and face the encirclement of the entire empire. You better think about it carefully." Although the two Imperial envoys' tone was unfriendly and their expressions were arrogant, they were the representatives of the Great Yin Empire. However, since they were here on behalf of Great Yan's Emperor, they had to be imposing. They could not tarnish the Emperor's reputation. Moreover, they did not say anything overboard. Ji Tianxing was not angry. He had expected this outcome. He sneered and said, "Please tell the Great Yin Emperor that I won't harm the citizens of the Great Yin Empire. I'm only here to hunt down Prince Lian. This is to get rid of an evil for the people and also to help the Great Yin Emperor resolve one of his worries." Upon hearing this, the expressions of the two Imperial envoys and the divine general changed. Anger could be seen on their faces. "Be asterisk starred. How dare you criticize His Majesty?" The golden-armored divine general scolded angrily. The two Imperial envoys' expressions darkened as well. They said coldly, "Brat, do you know the consequences of slandering His Majesty? Tianxing, no matter how you quibble or plead for mercy, His Majesty's decree cannot be changed. If you know what's good for you, turn around and leave now. Don't even think about taking half a step into the Great Yin Empire." Ji Tianxing's smile became even more derisive. He nodded and said, "It seems like you know about the grudge between Prince Lian and the Great Yin Emperor. Otherwise, why would you be so angry? In that case, I'll only ask one thing. If you give me an answer, I'll turn around and leave." The two Imperial envoys fell silent. After a brief discussion, the white-bearded old man said, "Ask whatever you want. However, whether we're willing to answer is our business." Ji Tianxing did not beat around the bush. He asked directly, "Is Prince Lian at Cloud Mist Pass? Did he pass by this place? Which direction did he go?" This question shouldn't make things difficult for you. In fact, you should be happy to hear it. Chapter 3183. Ji Tianxing spoke the truth. But to the two imperial envoys and the general, they felt that his words were sarcastic and full of sarcasm. The three of them didn't look too good. They muttered to themselves for a while and secretly communicated with each other. The white-bearded old man sighed. His Majesty is indeed wise. He guessed that this guy would chase after Grand Prince Lien and boldly barge into Yunwu Pass. The middle-aged man frowned and said in a displeased tone, "This guy is very arrogant. He doesn't even respect His Majesty. If it weren't for His Majesty's orders, I would have taken action and extinguished his arrogance." The white-bearded old man said with a bitter smile, "Don't be angry. If you really took action and taught him a lesson, you would have been defeated in a few moves. Don't forget, this guy is very strong. Even a grand prince has been defeated by him. Moreover, this guy is ruthless and bloodthirsty. He doesn't care about our identities." The middle-aged man's face darkened, and he didn't say anything else. The golden-armored general asked, "Imperial envoys, what do we do now? Should we tell him the truth?" The middle-aged man didn't make the decision on his own. He looked at the white-bearded old man and asked for his opinion. The white-bearded old man thought for a while and nodded. He transmitted, "It's better to avoid trouble. The grudge between this guy and Grand Prince Lien has nothing to do with us. There's no need to hide it for Grand Prince Lien. What's more, what he said wasn't wrong. If he can find Grand Prince Lien and kill him, it'll be considered a meritorious service. However, we can only keep these things in our hearts. We can't criticize him." The middle-aged man and the golden-armored general both nodded in agreement. The white-bearded old man looked at Ji Tianxing and said, "Tianxing, I'm an imperial envoy appointed by His Majesty. I'm only here to carry out His Majesty's orders. I've already passed on the message to you. As for Grand Prince Lien's whereabouts and direction, I have no obligation to tell you. However, I see that you're in high spirits and dignified. You're not as ruthless and bloodthirsty as the rumors say. Therefore, I'm not telling you as an imperial envoy. I'm telling you as an individual. Grand Prince Lien isn't in Yunwu Pass. He hasn't even been here. However, he entered the Empire's territory a day ago. As for which direction he went, this old man has no idea." After saying this, the white-bearded old man quietly looked at Ji Tianxing without saying another word. He had already said what he needed to say. Moreover, he had done Ji Tianxing a favor in his personal capacity. If Ji Tianxing continued to pester him, it would be Ji Tianxing being unreasonable. In fact, Ji Tianxing was well aware of this. Not only did he know that the white-bearded old man had done him a favor, he also knew why the old man had done so. As it turned out, Great Yan's emperor's attitude toward him was complicated and contradictory. They wanted to use him to get rid of Grand Prince Lien, but they were also afraid that he would cause trouble in the Great Yin Empire. If he could kill Grand Prince Lien, not only would he have gotten rid of a thorn in the Great Yin Emperor's side, but the Great Yin Emperor would also not have to pay any price, let alone bear the infamy. However, the Great Yin Emperor was also worried that if he went on a killing spree in the Great Yin Empire, he would incur the wrath of the people. At that time, no matter how unwilling the Great Yin Emperor was, he would have to send troops to kill Ji Tianxing to restore the prestige of the nation. He had to maintain his glorious image of loving the people like his own children to secure his position as emperor. Otherwise, he would be impeached and criticized by the diehards. However, the Great Yin Emperor knew that no matter how many elite troops he sent, they might not be able to kill Ji Tianxing. Instead, they would suffer heavy losses and sink deeper into the abyss. Once Ji Tianxing and the Great Yin Empire had a blood feud, there would be no way to salvage the situation. Even if the Great Yin Empire managed to kill Ji Tianxing in the end, they would suffer heavy losses. All in all, the Great Yin Emperor's thoughts were complicated. As an imperial envoy and a trusted aide of the Great Yin Emperor, the white-bearded old man naturally understood the emperor's thoughts. However, he could not say it out loud, lest he hurt the emperor's reputation and reputation. Therefore, he very cleverly chose to tell Ji Tianxing in his personal capacity. The twists and turns in this matter were not something an ordinary person could figure out. Ji Tianxing raised an eyebrow. He cupped his fists at the white-bearded old man and said, "Thank you for telling me. In that case, I'll take my leave now." After he finished speaking, he turned around and left cloud mist pass through the gap in the divine formation. Everyone stood where they were and watched Ji Tianxing's figure disappear into the night sky. They were silent for a while. The golden-armored general waved his hand, signaling the 1,000 elite soldiers to retreat. Only the white-bearded old man, the middle-aged man, and the golden-armored general were left. The three of them began to discuss. The middle-aged man frowned in confusion and muttered, "That kid's way of doing things is indeed different from what the rumors say. He doesn't seem like a vicious and bloodthirsty executioner who will stop at nothing." The white-bearded old man stroked his beard and nodded. Putting aside the grudge between him and Prince Lien, he's a peak-stage divine lord at such a young age. He can be said to be a once-in-a-lifetime genius. Such peerless geniuses are usually very proud. How can he be a villain who won't stop at nothing? The golden-armored general breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "I originally thought that this person would be very difficult to deal with, and that there would most likely be a fierce battle tonight. I didn't expect that he would be sent away so easily. Elder Yuan is really courageous to actually be able to intimidate him." The white-bearded old man stroked his beard and laughed self-deprecatingly. "General Wang, don't make fun of this old man. How can this old man have the ability to intimidate the famous killing god? It's His Majesty's prestige that killing god is afraid of and does not dare to offend. Furthermore, killing god is not a reckless person. Of course, he knows how to weigh the pros and cons. He only has a grudge with Prince Lien. He has no grudge with us. Why should he make things difficult for us and become enemies with the Empire?" The golden-armored general nodded repeatedly in agreement. The middle-aged man thought for a while and asked again, "Elder Yuan, is that kid really willing to leave just like that? Why did he believe your words without any doubt?" The white-bearded old man chuckled and said, "Firstly, this old man has no need to lie to him. There is no need for me to cover for Prince Lien. He is well aware of it. Secondly, do you think he didn't investigate? When we were negotiating, he had already secretly released his divine sense and searched the floating city several times. He didn't find any trace of Prince Lien, nor did he detect the aura left behind by Prince Lien. Of course, he has to believe this old man." The golden-armored general was even more impressed and flattered the white-bearded old man a few more times. The middle-aged man nodded slightly and thought for a while before continuing to ask, "Then in Elder Yuan's opinion, where will that kid go after leaving Yunwu Pass? Will he really be intimidated and not step into the Empire's territory?" The white-bearded old man shook his head again and chuckled. "Of course not. He is arrogant and lawless. How can he be intimidated by a few words from us? If he doesn't step into the Empire's territory, how will he hunt down Prince Lien? This is something that His Majesty has long anticipated." Chapter 3184. As it turned out, the white-bearded old man was a sly old fox. His speculation about Ji Tianxing was spot on. On the surface, it seemed like Ji Tianxing had been intercepted as soon as he entered the floating city. However, in truth, when he was negotiating with the two imperial envoys, he had secretly scouted the entire floating city. The white-bearded old man did not lie to him. Prince Lien was indeed not in the floating city and had not been a cloud mist pass. That was why Ji Tianxing had left without wasting any time. After leaving Cloud Mist Pass, he did not return to the Raging Flame Divine Nation. Instead, he stepped into the Great Yin Empire's territory. However, he went around Cloud Mist Pass, crossed a desolate mountain range, and entered Great Yan's territory. As for the direction of flight, it was, of course, southeast. His next destination was Thousand Sun Lake in Thousand Sun County. That was where the Heavenly Union Sect's headquarters was located. Ji Tianxing had expected Prince Lien to hide in the Heavenly Union Sect since he did not dare to return to the imperial capital. Currently, Prince Lien had not passed through Cloud Mist Pass and had fled to the Great Yin Empire. He had not come into contact with the Great Yin Emperor's men at all. This proved that Prince Lien was not only guarding against Ji Tianxing, but he was also guarding against the Great Yin Emperor's attacks. No matter how cunning and cautious you are, you still have to hide from the Heavenly Union sect. No matter what, the Heavenly Union sect's headquarters is at Thousand Sun Lake. There's no way you can run away. As Ji Tianxing hurried along, he calculated in his mind and sneered playfully. At this moment, Lin Shui's voice rang in his mind. "Brat, why aren't you fighting with the people of the Great Yin Empire?" Lin Shui, left emissary Jean, and the others were recuperating and cultivating in the divine ship. On the second day of the battle on Sky Dragon Mountain, they eagerly asked Ji Tianxing about the results of the battle. Ji Tianxing told them the truth. They were shocked beyond words. After a long time of excitement, Lin Shui and the others finally calmed down. Then, Lin Shui began to complain about Ji Tianxing. Why did he kill the 13,000 soldiers alone and not give her a chance to fight? Although Lord Blood Illusion left emissary Jean and the others did not say anything, they felt it was a pity. They had only participated in the initial battle, but had not been able to accompany Ji Tianxing to the end. As a result, news of that earth-shattering battle spread throughout the divine nations, and Ji Tianxing's name spread throughout the world. On the other hand, they were unknown and had missed the opportunity to make a name for themselves. Regarding this, Ji Tianxing's reaction was very calm. He consoled them. The battle that day was too intense. If you had participated in the battle, I would have had to divert my attention to protect you. Otherwise, you could have easily died. It doesn't matter if you miss this opportunity. Don't worry, there will be more opportunities to become famous in the future. With regards to his words of comfort, Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, and the others did not know whether to be happy or depressed. Fortunately, Lin Shui only grumbled a little and did not continue to pester him. In the next 10 days, Ji Tianxing had been hurrying on with his journey. Everyone else was also cultivating in seclusion in the divine worship. Tonight, Lin Shui was truly bored out of her wits. That was why she took the initiative to send a voice transmission to Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing frowned and said unhappily, "You're a savage and bloodthirsty demoness. I've only killed tens of thousands of people 10 days ago, and I've already been crowned as the god of slaughter and the butcher. If I clash with the Great Yin Empire again tonight and kill all the defenders of Cloud Mist Pass, I'll really become an executioner." Lin Shui said disapprovingly, "You're being indecisive. If I were you and had strength comparable to a godly king, I'd crush my way through. I'd kill all those who refuse to obey me. Even if I offend the entire Great Yin Empire, I wouldn't care. I'd crush them all the same. If I'm angered, I'll kill the Great Yin Emperor and slaughter the entire imperial city." Ji Tianxing could not help but roll his eyes. He said snappily, "That's why you're called the Bloody Blade Demoness, the Bloody Blade Demoness, the Bloodthirsty Demoness. You asked for it." Lin Shui was still unconcerned. She said with conviction, "Haven't you heard of this saying? A general's success is built on the bones of 10,000. Since ancient times, which peerless expert and hero didn't step on piles of corpses and become famous with shocking battle records?" Ji Tianxing patiently lectured her. He said, "Even if that's the case, you can't kill the innocent. You have to kill meaningful opponents and experts to build your reputation. If I waste my time and slaughter the defenders of Cloud Mist Pass, I'll only make Prince Lien laugh his head off." Lin Shui thought for a moment before she understood the stakes. She asked, "You're saying that Prince Lien is not only afraid of you, but he's also wary of the Great Yin Emperor? You're in a tripartite relationship now. The Great Yin Emperor wants to use you to get rid of Prince Lien, but he can't let you damage the dignity of the Empire. Prince Lien wants you to become enemies with the Great Yin Emperor and watch from the sidelines while the tigers fight. He even wants to reap the benefits?" Ji Tianxing chuckled and said, "MHM, you're not too stupid. You can still be saved. Go to hell." Lin Shui cursed. She said fiercely, "So, you're going to the Heavenly Union sect's headquarters now and take advantage of the situation to kill Prince Lien?" Ji Tianxing nodded. He asked, "What else can I do? Prince Lien is running for his life in a hurry. He didn't have time to come up with a plan. This is the best opportunity to get rid of him. If I waste my time and give him a chance to catch his breath, I'm afraid there'll be more variables. Lin Shui said disdainfully, "Aren't you just wasting your time if you travel alone?" Ji Tianxing was speechless. He could only bring out the divine warship. Swoosh! There was a flash of divine light. The pitch-black divine warship flew into the night sky and quickly returned to its original size of 10,000 feet. Ji Tianxing entered the divine warship in a flash. He walked into the control room and saw Lin Shui activating the formation. She was going to operate the divine formation herself. Hence, he could not help but ask, "Why are you alone? Where are left emissary Jean and right emissary Blood Dragon? Aren't you going to let them pilot the divine warship?" Lin Shui glanced at him and said, "They're still recovering and cultivating. There's no need for them to show their faces. I'll personally pilot the divine warship for you. It's much faster than them. This is the only way to save you time. Do you understand?" Ji Tianxing spread his hands and said, "Since you're so considerate, what else can I say?" Lin Shui glared at him again and said unhappily, "Then go and rest. I'll be enough to pilot the divine warship alone. I'll inform you when something happens." Ji Tianxing was a little worried. He asked, "Do you know where the headquarters of the Heavenly Union sect is?" Lin Shui was stunned. Then she snorted and said, "Of course I don't know. Then why don't you tell me?" Ji Tianxing was speechless again. "Why are you so arrogant if you don't know? Thousand Sun County, Thousand Sun Lake. Just fly southeast. It'll take you at least 20 days to reach there." I know. You can go now," Lin Shui urged impatiently. Ji Tianxing did not waste any more words with her. He got up and left the control room. When he returned to the secret room, he took out the Jiuqian 10 Absolutes Pagoda and entered the distorted space-time to cultivate. Chapter 3185. The dim light distorted in the sky. Ji Tianxing stood under the majestic blood flame sacred tree with a gratified smile on his face. It has indeed grown taller, and its divine power aura has also become stronger. It was just as he had expected. Previously, he had fought a decisive battle with 13,000 soldiers on Celestial Dragon Mountain and then slaughtered his way into the raging flame royal city. After that earth-shattering battle, the blood flame sacred tree had absorbed a vast amount of divine souls and bloodline power, and it had clearly become much stronger. Not only had the sacred tree grown taller, but its divine light had also become more dazzling. Even the soaring crimson flames had become more turbulent and mighty. At the same time, purple shoots had sprouted from more bare branches. The buds on the tree branches had also gradually grown into leaves. The blood flame sacred tree had gained life, and it was thriving with vitality. Yin Yao, Ji Ku, Ji Wushuang, Zhen Hong, and the others were still cultivating around the sacred tree. The blood flame sacred tree had become stronger, and the benefits they had received had also multiplied. Their strength had improved even faster. Ji Tianxing walked around the sacred tree to check on everyone, Qianyu and the black dragon. Seeing that everything was normal, he also sat down cross-legged under the divine tree and began to cultivate in seclusion. The previous battles had also been a test and training for him, and he had benefited greatly from them, especially the heaven-punishing divine art. He had gained more inspiration and understanding, and he would definitely be able to perfect it. Ji Tianxing began cultivating the heaven-punishing divine art, constantly correcting and perfecting the first stage of the art. As time passed, he continued to absorb the power of the blood flame sacred tree, and at the same time, he used up large amounts of divine stones and resources. Unknowingly, half a year had passed. The first stage of the heaven-punishing divine art had become even more perfect and wondrous. At the same time, Ji Tianxing's strength had also increased greatly, and he was gradually advancing toward the 9th level of the Divine Lord Realm. Ji Tianxing did not stop, and he continued to deduce the second stage of the heaven-punishing divine art. This process was very long, complicated, and tedious. It required tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of deductions and attempts. Ordinary people did not have such comprehension and thinking ability, nor did they have such strong willpower. However, Ji Tianxing did it. Moreover, he was immersed in it and didn't feel bored at all. Time passed quickly, and the distorted space was silent. In the outside world, Lin Shui was driving the godly battleship alone toward the Thousand Sun County. The journey was very boring. In particular, Shui Huan, left emissary Jean, and Blood Dragon were all in seclusion in the secret chamber. She was alone in the driver's seat with no one to talk to. The first 2 days were fine, but after the third day, she felt a little bored. However, she didn't relax, nor did she dare to let her guard down. She continued to rush towards Qianyang County at full speed. She knew the importance of this matter, so how could she dare to neglect it? However, she couldn't help but mutter in her heart, "Why is it so peaceful all the way here? There isn't even a single person to intercept or track me." Even if Great Yan's emperor had a tacit understanding with Tianxing, he could continue to feign ignorance. What about Prince Lien? He must know we're chasing after him. We've already returned to the Great Yin Empire, and this is his territory. Why didn't he send anyone to intercept or harass us? Lin Shui had long been on guard against the Great Yin Emperor and Prince Lien sending people to harass them. However, things were a little strange. It was different from what she had imagined. She couldn't help but feel worried. She thought to herself, could it be that Prince Lien's influence in the Great Yin Empire is weak, unlike in the Blood Flame and Raging Flame Divine Nations where he can do whatever he wants? That's possible. After all, this is the Great Yin Emperor's territory. The Great Yin Emperor had always been wary of Prince Lien. How could he allow Prince Lien to expand his influence? There's another possibility. Prince Lien hasn't recovered from his injuries yet. He was in a hurry to escape and didn't have time to deploy his troops. However, that doesn't make sense. He only needs to send a transmission jade slip and explain the situation to the Heavenly Sect. The Heavenly Sect is so powerful. They should be able to send a large number of experts to intercept and kill us. Lin Shui could not figure it out no matter how she thought about it. Instead, the more she thought about it, the more confused she became. In a fit of anger, she decided to stop thinking about it. She muttered angrily, Figuring out schemes and plans isn't my strong suit. I wonder where Tianxing and Prince Lien come up with so many ideas and schemes. Don't they feel a headache from scheming all day long? Who cares what they think? I'll just sail the ship. If we encounter a powerful enemy, we'll just fight to the death." With that thought in mind, Lin Shui felt refreshed. Her thoughts were clear. Meanwhile, in Tianfeng County that was 15 million miles away from Lin Shui and the others, a dark red divine warship that was 10,000 feet long and shaped like a huge dragon was speeding through the night sky. This was a supreme-grade, monarch-grade divine warship. Not only was its defense strong, but its attack power was also powerful. Even its flying speed was astonishing. There were more than 60 people on the divine warship. All of them were elites and experts. These people were Prince Lien's confidants, his most trusted followers and guards. Naturally, there were also a few of his favorite concubines. At this moment, Prince Lien was sitting in his personal secret chamber. He was waiting patiently for something. After a while, a young man in black armor walked quickly into the secret chamber and bowed to Prince Lien. "Greetings, Your Highness. There's already some progress." Prince Lien raised his eyebrows and said in a dignified tone, "Speak." Lienson didn't dare to talk nonsense. He directly reported, "The informant we planted in Yunwu Pass just sent news." According to the informant's report, on the second night after we entered the Great Yin Empire, an expert sneaked into Yunwu Pass. However, the general and 2 imperial envoys have been waiting for a long time and stopped that expert. I don't know what they talked about, but after some negotiation, they didn't fight. That expert left quietly. After that, our informant asked around and found out that the expert was Tianxing. Obviously, the informant Prince Lien had planted in Yunwu Pass was of a lower status and didn't participate in the interception that night. However, this news was enough for Prince Lien. He frowned and said in a low voice, "As I expected, That bastard Tianxing really went to Yunwu Pass. Since they didn't fight and even negotiated, it means that the two imperial envoys were happy to see Tianxing chase after me. They must have told Tianxing the truth. That's why he left Yunwu Pass. Tianxing definitely won't give up. He should be rushing toward Qianyang County. He's delusional to chase after and stop me. Lien San comforted him. Don't worry, Your Highness. We entered the Empire a day earlier than him. Also, we can find a teleportation formation along the way. That brat definitely won't be able to catch up with us. Prince Lien didn't comment. He frowned and asked, what about Lien Si? Didn't I ask him to send a message to the vice sect master and elders at the headquarters? Why isn't there any news yet? Lien San comforted him again. Don't worry, Your Highness. Once the headquarters sends back news, Lien Si will definitely report it immediately. The fastest mobile version of the website. Chapter 3186. Naturally, Prince Lien was not worried that Ji Tianxing would catch up to him. First, his worship was much faster than Lin Shui's monarch grade high-grade divine worship. Second, he could use the teleportation divine formations in the various counties. No one would dare to stop him. However, Ji Tianxing would not dare to do that unless he wanted to make an enemy out of the Great Yin Emperor and declare war on the Great Yin Empire. At this moment, Prince Lien was worried about another problem. Naturally, he would not be caught or intercepted by Ji Tianxing as he fled back to the Unity Heaven sect. However, what would happen after he fled to the Unity Heaven sect? Would he be able to cultivate in seclusion without any worries? Prince Lien was not so sure. He had a big question mark on his mind. The hidden chamber fell silent. Since Prince Lien did not speak, Lien San could only stand quietly. Time passed quietly. About half an hour later, another divines in black armor walked briskly into the hidden chamber. It was Lien Si. He quickly walked up to Prince Lien and bowed respectfully. Lien Si greets Your Highness. Prince Lien had been waiting for him. When he saw that Lien Si had finally arrived, he hurriedly waved his hand to dismiss him. He asked, Lien Si, did the headquarters reply? Lien Si respectfully replied, reporting to Your Highness, just a moment ago, this subordinate received a message from the vice sect leader. The vice sect master said that there's been a breakthrough in the Verdant Jade Palace recently. The 50-faction alliance has successfully broken through 2 grand formations and arrived at the palace's gates. Everyone was overjoyed. Originally, the sect master had been guarding the Verdant Jade Palace with 18 elders, reverends, and 300 elite disciples. However, after this incident, the dozens of factions were eager to make a move. They secretly mobilized their forces and gathered at the Verdant Jade Palace. This was because once the Verdant Jade Palace's gates were opened, the factions would fight for a spot to enter the palace. Hence, 10 days ago, the sect master mobilized some people and sent them to the Verdant Jade Palace. Among them, there are 2 grand elders for consecrators, and 200 elite disciples. When Prince Lien heard the first half of the message, he was happy and expectant. After all, he was determined to obtain the Verdant Jade Palace. However, when he heard the second half of the story, his expression darkened, and his eyes were filled with worry. He stared at Lien Si with a dignified gaze and asked in a deep voice, who is left in the headquarters? Lien Si was intimidated by the powerful pressure. He lowered his head in fear and replied truthfully. Replying to the prince, the defense of the headquarters is currently very weak. Only the vice sect master, 3 elders, 12 deacons, 200 elite disciples, 5,000 ordinary disciples, and more than 10,000 servants are left. Although Prince Lien was already mentally prepared, when he heard the news, his vision still went dark, and he almost couldn't help but curse. He was so angry that his whole body was trembling. He had to take a few deep breaths to suppress his anger. Damn it! Ever since I joined the Heavenly Sect, when has the headquarters ever been so defenseless? Why did such a thing happen when this king was returning to the headquarters? Why? Is this the will of the heavens? Prince Lien clenched his fist so tightly that his knuckles cracked as he roared furiously. Lien San and Lien Si were trembling with fear. They quickly knelt on one knee and buried their heads in the ground, not daring to breathe. After a long period of silence, Grand Prince Lien finally calmed down and muttered to himself, "Vice Sect Master's strength is on par with mine. The three elders are only in the 8th degree realm. As for those deacons and elite disciples, they're not even worth mentioning. Even if there are more than 10,000 people in the headquarters, they will not be enough for Tianqing to slaughter. If I really return to the headquarters, not only will it not be safe, but I will also be waiting for death." Hearing this, Lien San and Lien Si were filled with anxiety and worry. The two of them quickly tried to comfort Prince Lien and help him come up with a plan. "Your Highness, please calm down. The Sect Master's arrangement is also for the Green Jade Palace. It is a great opportunity, and we cannot miss it no matter what. Your Highness, the Sect Master's will is very firm. The competition between the 50 forces is also very fierce, and the battle is about to break out. Under the current situation, the Sect Master will not send any experts back to the headquarters. How about this? We will not return to the headquarters. Instead, we will take a detour and secretly go to the Pure Wind County. Your secret palace is there." Hearing Lien Si's suggestion, Lien San's eyes lit up, and he quickly nodded in agreement. "That's right, Your Highness. We can go to the Pure Wind County. The mystic area is very hidden. Moreover, the people guarding the palace are your absolute confidants. It will be very safe." Prince Lien hesitated for a moment and seemed to be tempted. But after a moment of consideration, he still shook his head and refused. Although the mystic area and palace in the Pure Wind County were secretly built by me many years ago as a precaution and a refuge, it is reasonable to say that the Heavenly Sect and the First Prince do not know about it, so it should be very safe. But I can't go there. Lien San and Lien Si were stunned and asked doubtfully, "Your Highness, why can't you go?" Prince Lien sneered and said with resentment, "Because you are my confidants. Not only you two know about it, even Lien Air knows about the mystic area and palace." Lien San and Lien Si were even more confused and asked subconsciously, "But Your Highness, didn't Lien Air die in battle?" "Ha ha ha." Prince Lien nodded and said, "Yes, Lien Air sacrificed himself and even blew himself up. He would never reveal this secret, but we were not at the scene. Who can guarantee that Lien Air did not betray me before he died? What's more, that bastard Tianqing is full of tricks. He will definitely use other methods to get information and secrets from Lien Air. I suspect that bastard also knows about the existence of the palace in the Pure Wind County. If he follows the vine to find the melon, won't I lose my life on the spot?" Lien San and Lien Si were stunned. While they were shocked, they also felt a little disappointed. The two of them didn't expect that Lien Air would be so loyal to the prince. It could even be said that he would never change his mind, even in death. In the end, the prince would not completely trust Lien Air and would even be wary and suspicious of him. Lien San and Lien Si could not help but think that their status was not as high as Lien Air's, and they were not as valued by the prince as Lien Air. Then how insignificant were the two of them in the prince's heart? Of course, they were only thinking about it and did not dare to show the slightest dissatisfaction. At this time, Prince Lien continued, "Although what I said just now may sound a little excessive or unbelievable to you, I must be careful. But Ben Wong must act cautiously and prepare for the worst. If I make a mistake, I will lose everything. Do you understand? It's better to be safe than sorry." Lien San and Lien Si felt a little better and nodded to show that they understood. "Your Highness, if we can't go back to the headquarters in Pure Wind County, where should we go?" Prince Lien's mouth curved into a cold smile and said in a mocking tone, "Now that things have come to this, where can we go? There's only that place." The fastest mobile version of the website. Chapter 3187. Although the journey was boring, Lin Shui persevered. For 20 days, she steered the divine battleship alone. The result was just as Ji Tianqing had expected. On the evening of the 20th day, the divine battleship finally arrived at the Thousand Sun Lake in the Thousand Sun County. This lake, which was located in the middle of the mountains, had a circumference of 100,000 miles. The lake water was deep and cold. Even the lightest feather could not float on the surface. Anything that fell into the thousand-sun lake would sink without a trace. The evening breeze blew, but the surface of the lake was like a mirror. There were no ripples. However, it was said that this mysterious thousand-sun lake was home to many powerful divine beasts. The lake was surrounded by towering mountains. Clouds and mist swirled around it, and the roars of beasts could be heard. The headquarters of the famous Heavenly Union sect in the Great Yin Empire was in the depths of the Thousand-Sun Lake. Ordinary people did not even have the right to enter the Thousand-Sun Lake, let alone see the Heavenly Union sect's headquarters. The thick mist on the lake covered everything 100 feet away. It was hazy and could not be seen clearly. The divine battleship stopped at the Thousand-Sun Lake. Lin Shui heaved a sigh of relief and muttered to herself, "I've finally completed my mission and arrived at the Thousand-Sun Lake. Now it's up to that lad." After saying that, she extended her divine perception to Ji Tianxing's secret chamber. She wanted to wake Ji Tianxing up. In the end, there was no one in the secret chamber. There was only a divine pagoda floating in the air. Lin Shui guessed that Ji Tianxing was cultivating in the divine pagoda, but could not contact him. She could only wait patiently. That lad said that I would need 20 days to reach the Thousand-Sun Lake. He should remember the time and end his seclusion, right? As she spoke, Lin Shui looked at the Thousand-Sun Lake cautiously. She controlled the divine formation to make the divine battleship invisible. Soon, the divine battleship merged with the clouds in the sky and disappeared without a trace. While Lin Shui looked around cautiously, she waited patiently for Ji Tianxing to appear. At the same time, Ji Tianxing had been in seclusion for 3 years in the distorted space-time of the divine pagoda. In the past 3 years, he had been trying to figure out the second level of the heaven-punishing divine skill. The first level of a cultivation technique was to establish one's foundation, while the second level of a cultivation technique sought for changes and breakthroughs. It contained even more laws and principles and possessed even greater might. Therefore, the deduction and perfection of the second level of the cultivation technique were extremely complicated and tedious. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing's 3 years of cultivation were fruitful. He had successfully deduced the second level of the heaven punishment divine skill. Of course, that was only the foundation and framework of the second layer of the cultivation method. The details weren't perfect enough, so it couldn't be considered a true success. If he wanted to complete and perfect the second layer of the cultivation technique, he would have to spend at least a few more years. Unfortunately, he didn't have that much time to continue comprehending the deity incantation. He didn't forget about the Thousand-Sun Lake and the He Tian sect, so he ended his cultivation. This time, he had been cultivating the heaven-punishing divine skill and deducing the second stage of the skill. He had not deliberately increased his strength. Even so, his strength and foundation continued to rise, becoming more and more robust. Even though he was still at the 8th level Divine Lord Realm, he was not far from the 9th level Divine Lord Realm. His true combat strength had also increased by more than 2 times compared to before. Swoosh! After finishing his cultivation, Ji Tianxing opened his eyes and muttered to himself, "Calculating the time, I have been in seclusion for 3 years, and 20 days have passed in the outside world. If nothing unexpected happened, Lin Shui should have arrived at the Thousand-Sun Lake." With that, he got up and left the distorted space-time, returning to the secret chamber. After putting away the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda, he rushed to the cockpit of the deity vessel. As expected, the deity vessel stopped at the shore of a large lake. Lin Shui sat alone in the cockpit, observing the situation around her. Seeing that Ji Tianxing had arrived, Lin Shui obviously heaved a sigh of relief. She snorted unhappily and said, "I didn't disappoint you. I arrived at the Thousand-Sun Lake on time. On the other hand, you were a bit slow. Why did you only come out now?" Ji Tianxing knew that she was just complaining and didn't have any ill intentions, so he ignored her. He used his divine perception to scan the surroundings. Seeing that it was quiet within 30,000 miles, and there were no traces of the deity race, he asked, "How long have you been here? Did you see anyone?" Lin Shui answered honestly, "I've been here for 2 hours. I've been observing the situation, but I didn't see anyone." Ji Tianxing nodded and frowned. Logically speaking, the entire Thousand Sun Lake is the He Tian sect's territory, so there should be guards patrolling the area. But why is there no one within a 30,000-mile radius? There must be something fishy about this. Lin Shui blinked and asked doubtfully, "What you mean is that Prince Lien returned to the He Tian sect before us, and he's already asked the He Tian sect to set up an ambush. It's so quiet around here. Is he trying to lure us in?" Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "It's possible. But there's another possibility. The He Tian sect's defense is weak, so they had no choice but to shrink their defense circle and withdraw everyone back into the mountain." Lin Shui was instantly stunned. She frowned in disbelief. How is this possible? The He Tian sect is one of the top 3 sects in the Great Yin Empire. They have at least 100 Sir Gods and 10 to 20,000 disciples and guards. How can their defense be weak? Especially the Grand Elder, Sect Master, and Deputy Sect Master of the He Tian sect. It said that they are all Sir Gods at the peak of the 9th stage. Lin Shui did not know about the Green Jade Palace, so she thought that the He Tian sect's people were in the mountain. Ji Tianxing only smiled and did not explain further. "It's useless for us to observe here. Let's save some time and go directly to the He Tian sect's mountain." Lin Shui hurriedly nodded in agreement. "Okay, no matter whether the He Tian sect's mountain is weak or not, we will know once we try. You will control the divine warship, and I will wake up Shui Huan and left emissary Jin." Shui Lin rubbed her palms together in an excited manner. Imagining the upcoming battle, she felt her blood boiling. Ji Tianxing had a premonition and could vaguely guess the result. He raised his hand and called out to Lin Shui, who was about to leave. "Don't be anxious. Let me check the situation first. Don't let them fight for now." Although Lin Shui did not know what he meant, she still nodded in agreement. Swoosh! The divine warship passed through the clouds and flew toward the center of the Thousand Sun Lake at lightning speed. After about 15 minutes, the divine warship had flown more than 40,000 miles. The center of the Thousand Sun Lake was in front of them. On the surface of the water that was surrounded by clouds and mist, an island with a radius of more than 200 miles could be vaguely seen. The island was oval-shaped, and the terrain was high in the north and low in the south. The south was close to the water, and the north was grassland and forest. The north of the island was a majestic mountain range. Ji Tianxing could see clearly that there were many herb fields and gardens in the southern peninsula. There were also many divine beasts. In the mountain range of the northern peninsula, there were houses and palaces built on each mountain peak. They looked solemn and imposing. Without a doubt, that was the He Tian sect's mountain. Chapter 3188. The ship arrived at the edge of Lake Hard Island and stopped above the water. Ji Tianxing handed the ship over to Lin Shui to control. He left the ship alone and stood in the sky overlooking Lake Hard Island, observing with his god's eye. The situation was as he expected on the water around Lake Hard Island. "No, try to update. Please refresh later." This chapter is trying to update. Please refresh later. Handsome man and beautiful woman. Please register as a member first. Register as a member of this site and use the bookmark function on the bookshelf to read the latest updates. Phone: :// if this chapter is nonsense like the author asking for votes. Please skip it and continue to the next chapter. Please save this page first so that you can read it later, or you won't be able to find this chapter later. Recommended author: Strange Stories of the Southern Song Dynasty. Strange Stories of the Southern Song Dynasty Summary. He was just a small servant, but he was involved in an ancient secret. A bizarre murder case had sent an affectionate young miss and a cold and arrogant little maid to him. Were they really innocent people who were involved in this? Westlake Broken Bridge, strange and treacherous. Love connected by a thread. The truth is just a short distance away. Strange Stories of the Southern Song Dynasty forwarding address /33xs/317/3175 17553/317/31755/3/content trial reading chapter 001. Returning home in glory Southern Dynasty, Qi Kingdom, Qiantang, Shieling Bridge. The moon hung high in the sky. The night fog curled up on the road. An oil wall carriage came from afar, running lightly on a small road in the countryside of Jiangnan. There was a pair of lanterns in front of the carriage. As the carriage bumped along with the rolling wheels, the delicate and beautiful word Su on the lanterns also swayed. The carriage was draped with a light veil, and a coachman sat in front of the carriage holding the reins. The moonlight was like water, illuminating the ground and not making it dark. More importantly, he was already familiar with this road. He could walk on it with his eyes closed, so the night did not affect the speed of the carriage at all. The veil swayed with the wind, occasionally revealing three beautiful figures in the carriage. In the middle was a girl in a red dress. Her hair was cloudy and her steps were light. Looking from behind, one could only see her slender neck like an elegant swan. The girl on the left was white and the girl on the right was green. Based on her clothes and hairstyle, she was still dressed as a young girl. Obviously, she was the maid of the beauty in the middle. But seeing the three of them sitting together, walking under the moonlight, and their crisp laughter, it was obvious they were like sisters. The girl in the middle was Qiantang's #1 dancer, Su Yaoyao. The girls in white and green were her maids, Bai Su and Qing Ting, who were as close as sisters. The three ladies were traveling at night to meet with young Master Wan, an official's family. Tonight, young Master Wan had set up a banquet and invited all the local talents and beauties. First, domain name, please remember _3. Suddenly, the frosty night sky changed from a cold pale white to a golden light, as if a sun that had been sealed for 10,000 years had suddenly broken free from its shackles and leaped into the sky. The coachman, Old Huang, who was driving the carriage, suddenly couldn't see anything. In a panic, he hurriedly pulled on the reins. The two horses were abruptly reined in by him and reared up. Their four big hooves heavily smashed onto the ground with a paw sound, abruptly stopping the carriage. Ouch! The three girls in the carriage were caught off guard and almost fell out of the carriage because of the sudden stop. Fortunately, the three of them were squeezed together. Although the three girls' delicate bodies were light, how wide could an oil wall carriage be? Therefore, they didn't roll out of the carriage. If they fell and messed up their hair, it would be fine, but if they fell and hit the ground with their faces, it would ruin their beautiful faces. Old Huang, what's going on? Su Yaoyao was a little angry. She covered her face with her hand and blocked the strong light. She lifted the veil, bent over, and stood on the carriage. Bai Su and Qing Ting followed. The three of them stood at the front of the carriage and looked up at the sky. As soon as they saw the strange scene in the sky, they were stunned. He saw a huge golden wheel-like object that looked like a heavenly king was hovering in the air. The light that was as bright as the sun was radiating from it. It swayed in the air as though it couldn't support itself. All of a sudden, the golden wheel-like object exploded. The huge shock wave was like ripples that quickly spread in all directions. The driver, Old Huang, cried out in surprise. He rolled off the carriage like a lazy donkey and dove into the bottom of the carriage. On the other hand, Su Yaoyao, Bai Su, and Qing Ting couldn't dodge in time, so the golden light passed through their bodies. The three beautiful girls swayed a little and fell to the ground. The golden light disappeared, and so did the golden wheel in the sky. A few places were set on fire, and smoke rose. The night returned to its cold state as the light shone on the three beautiful bodies. The night dew was sparkling and translucent. The grass was like a carpet, the pine trees were like a canopy, and the path was silent. The oily wagon stood there, and the two horses snorted blankly, as if nothing had happened. Time flew by. 500 years later, the moon was high in the sky, and the lanterns were lit. It was a lively time for Qinhuai. Beside the peach leaf fairy, a young man waved a small fan and walked over slowly. Many passers-by on the road would greet him warmly, Brother Han. The young man would return their greetings with a smile and was very polite. Brother Han was dressed in a round-neck robe with a leather belt around his waist. He wore a pair of legless headdress and a beautiful rose by his temples. It complemented his handsome face and made him look a little devilish. However, there was nothing he could do. This was the custom of the Song dynasty. From the emperor to the commoners, as long as they were men, they liked to wear flowers. The young man in front of him was tall and handsome. Even when he wasn't smiling, there was a hint of a smile on his face. It was slightly upturned and very likable. His pair of black and shiny eyebrows made his eyes look especially spirited and lively. It was as if he could speak as he looked around. He was different from those men who were covered in grease and insisted on wearing flowers. When young ladies and young wives saw him, they couldn't help but take a few more glances. This person's name was Yang Han. 3 days ago, he was a member of the Nanjing Street Department of the Song dynasty. The street department was in charge of the city streets. Its functions and status were similar to the urban management of the later generations. However, the urban management of the Song dynasty had many functions. It was almost a combination of policing, environmental protection, taxation, fire control, price inspection, industrial and commercial law enforcement, greening and cleaning, and handling illegal road occupation. Those who could do this were either a scoundrel like Neo Air who could control people, or a slick person who knew how to steer according to the wind. However, when he really had to fight with people, he had to be a good fighter. Not only could he bend and stretch, but he also had to be soft and hard. Yang Han belonged to the latter. He was eloquent, alert, and had good martial arts. Although he was a commoner at the bottom of society, the 300 years of the Song dynasty were the best and wealthiest dynasty among all the dynasties. If you didn't have the ambition to become a marquis and conquer the world, you just wanted to be a commoner. Or if you only had the ability to be a commoner, then you were born in the Song dynasty and had cultivated merit for several generations. In other dynasties, the lives of commoners were far inferior. Therefore, Yang Han, a little urban management of the Song dynasty's Jiankong city, lived a very interesting life. Unfortunately, 3 days ago, he lost his fat job. It wasn't that Yang Han was impartial and offended some big shot. It wasn't that he met a scoundrel with some background and couldn't continue working. It was because the head of the street department, Master Li, had taken a fancy to him and wanted to marry his daughter to him. The head of the department was equivalent to the captain of the urban management team. He was a member of the Yamen, and people like Yang Han were all recruited by the head of the department. Therefore, to be precise, Yang Han was the head of the department. To be able to become the son-in-law of the head of the department, there should be smoke rising from his ancestors' graves. However, Yang Han was also a smooth and slick character. He was very familiar with the city's fox and rat society in Jiankong City. He was very well informed. He knew the head of the department's precious daughter better than the head of the department himself. How could he agree? Master Li's daughter was called Li Xiao. She was born beautiful, but she didn't behave properly in the imperial examinations. According to the news that Yang Han heard, this Miss Li had several lovers. She even had an abortion for one of her recent lovers, a scholar named Mu Si. Until now, the two of them were still hooking up with each other, and their relationship was unclear. As the saying goes, it's better to marry a prostitute and live a good life than to marry a red apricot over the wall. Yang Han was also an ambitious man. He didn't want to be a scapegoat for that surnamed Mu and be criticized behind his back. Therefore, Yang Han used all his means and didn't hesitate to sully himself. He was unwilling to give no matter what. However, he didn't know what was wrong with this Master Li's brain. He didn't understand the principle that a forcefully twisted melon won't be sweet. He actually threatened to resign from his job. Yang Han naturally refused to give in. Therefore, he lost his job. These 2 days, when people on the street mentioned the missing Yang Han, many people couldn't help but sigh. They felt sorry for him, but they didn't expect that he would show up this evening. There was a restaurant next to Tao Yidu. Yang Han walked in, picked a table, and sat down. He raised his voice and said, "Shopkeeper, a bowl of duck blood and vermicelli soup, a tray of crab roe buns, and a jiao of wine." When Miss Du, who was wearing an apron, saw it was Yang Han, she was delighted. Girls love pretty boys. Who didn't love to see a handsome young man? She and her father took care of this shop. Every time Yang Han came, the duck blood and vermicelli soup was full of ingredients. They were even willing to put a spoonful of pepper for him. She immediately agreed in a crisp voice and got busy. Yang Han turned his head and saw Old Fan passing by with a load. He hurriedly shouted, "Hey, Old Fan, come in, come in. Cut me half a tail of mutton and a set of pig's pancreas." Old Fan was a person who carried a load and sold cooked food. Yang Han was familiar with him. When he heard him call, he hurriedly mustered up his courage and entered the shop. He put down the carrying pole and the chopping board on Yang Han's table. He picked up a piece of mutton and began to cut it. As he cut, he smiled and said, "Brother Han, you're looking for a better job. Where are you getting rich now?" Yang Han was waiting for him to say this. He arrogantly glanced around. Seeing that everyone was listening attentively, he smiled reservedly. Not really, not really. I'm just indebted to our Jiankong Prefecture's magistrate, Master Li, for his appreciation. Now, I'm a small steward in the Li estate." Old Fan was shocked. He exclaimed, "Io, that's amazing. A 7th-ranked official in front of the Prime Minister's door. Brother Han, now that you're a steward in Master Li's estate, I'm afraid your status isn't lower than Master Li's, right?" Yang Han smiled faintly. It wasn't good for him to flatter himself, but he didn't deny it either. Clearly, he tacitly agreed with Old Fan's words. Originally, why else would he be dressed like a flower with a hairpin and a sachet tied to his waist? Why else would he appear in the area he was previously in charge of? He was returning home in silken robes. Southern Song Chronicles 2/33XS/317/5/3/33XS/3175553/. Chapter 3189. Not only were Shang Yunqi, the elders, and deacons aghast, but the elite disciples and guards were also in an uproar. Everyone was bluffing, wanting to use the reputation and prestige of the Joined Heaven sect to intimidate Ji Tianxing. Unexpectedly, Ji Tianxing did not fall for it at all and had already seen through the truth. How could they not be frightened and anxious? Many days ago, they had heard that Tianxing and Grand Prince Lian had a feud that would not end until one of them was dead. If not for the tense situation at the Green Jade Palace and the urgent need for reinforcements, the sect would have already sent experts to help Grand Prince Lian kill Ji Tianxing. Later, Ji Tianxing went south, killing people until their heads rolled and blood flowed. He also won the title of Killing God. Especially the battle outside the Raging Flame Royal City, Ji Tianxing's title of Killing God spread throughout the world, and his prestige reached its peak. The disciples and guards of the Joined Heaven sect knew that with their small number of people, they were not enough to kill Ji Tianxing. Fortunately, Shang Yunqi quickly calmed down and stabilized his footing. He looked at Ji Tianxing with a proud expression and sneered. "Brat, you are so arrogant that you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. This is the headquarters of the Joined Heaven sect, not something the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom can compare to. Do you think we are afraid of you? Our sect's protective array is the result of the painstaking efforts of several generations of sect masters. It can be said to be invincible under the Divine King realm. For more than 30,000 years, the protective array has never been broken. You can't even break the protective array, and you still dare to talk nonsense? What a joke." Hearing his words, the elders, deacons, disciples, and guards who were originally flustered immediately calmed down. Everyone thought about it and felt that the vice sect master's words made sense. Their protective array was invincible, so what was there to be afraid of? Thus, many deacons, disciples, and guards regained their confidence and began to mock Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing was not angry and sneered in a mocking tone. "I can't break your protective array? Then open your dog eyes wide and see clearly." Then, he stopped talking and focused on breaking the formation. Now that he had used all of his power, the speed at which he was breaking the formation had increased significantly. The divine light of the defensive formation started to flicker, and the circulating divine power also started to be blocked. The light was bright and dim, and the divine power was strong and weak. Originally, he might need 4 hours to break this great formation. With his current speed, he would probably be able to finish it in 3 hours. Shang Yunqi, the elders, and the deacons saw the obvious changes in the divine formation. Their hearts were in their throats. Ji Tianxing's confidence and arrogance made them feel even more pressured and worried. Finally, Shang Yunqi could not withstand the pressure and decisively ordered, "All disciples, listen up. Use all your strength to maintain the sect protecting Grand Array. Deacons and elders, follow me and control the formation to counterattack." This seat wants to see just how capable that lawless little bastard is. Following his command, the 200 disciples and 800 guards unleashed their god force into the formation to protect the sect. The sect protecting Grand Array was replenished by the majestic god force, and its power increased by a few notches. The light also became more dazzling. At this time, Shang Yunqi, the 3 elders, and the 12 deacons worked together to control the formation and launch a counterattack. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Boom, boom, boom. The huge divine light shield released tens of thousands of blade lights and sword shadows, which rained down on Ji Tianxing like a storm. In the sky full of divine light, there were also hundreds of dazzling purple lightning bolts that blasted toward Ji Tianxing. At this critical moment, Ji Tianxing still did not move an inch. He did not even care about his own safety. He even had the time to remind Lin Shui, "Try to stay as far away as possible. Don't get hurt accidentally." Lin Shui was stunned and asked subconsciously, "You are in the most dangerous situation, and you still have the time to care about me?" Ji Tianxing did not answer. After all, the sky full of divine attacks had already descended and drowned his figure. At this critical moment, he used the infinite sky of turbidity secret technique, and his body became transparent and blurry. The divine light that covered the sky passed through him without any delay and landed on the calm surface of the lake. Instantly, a deafening sound exploded, and huge waves burst out of the lake. This was under the influence of the infinite sky of turbidity. 80% of the divine attacks were neutralized by the world. If not for this, the surrounding several hundred miles of lake surface would have dried up, revealing the bottom of the lake that was tens of thousands of feet deep. The heavenly sect protecting Grand Array was unbelievably powerful. Bam, bam, bam. Hundreds of sword shadows hit the divine warship not far away, and there was a series of muffled sounds. The divine warship was knocked to the side and flashed with divine light. Cracks appeared on its surface, and it was slightly damaged. Lin Shui was shocked and angry. She finally believed Ji Tianxing's words. If they were too close, they would be accidentally injured. Seeing that Ji Tianxing was unharmed, she was relieved. She quickly retreated 1,000 miles and observed the situation on the lake. The sect protecting Grand Array's first round of attacks didn't hurt Ji Tianxing. Instead, it made the Thousand Sun Lake boil. Shang Yunqi, the 3 elders, and the deacons were all stunned. They found it unbelievable. "This is so strange. How can we not hit him?" Again, Shang Yunqi frowned and ordered another attack. Therefore, the elders, and the deacons worked together to control the sect protecting Grand Array again. They released the destructive light of the sacred tree and attacked Ji Tianxing. Sword shadows and giant blades thousands of feet long rained down like a storm. All kinds of divine flames, icicles, lightning, and divine power shadows lit up the night sky, dazzling and eye-catching. This sect protecting Grand Array, which was said to be invincible below the Divine King level, released its strongest power, which could destroy tens of thousands of miles. However, a strange scene appeared again. The sky full of divine attacks and sword shadows all passed through Ji Tianxing's shadow and scattered in the Thousand Sun Lake. Boom, 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 kaboom. A deafening explosion resounded through the sky. The surface of the lake, which was thousands of miles long, was shaking ceaselessly, rolling up huge waves that soared into the sky and splashing out a watery mist that blotted out the sun. However, Ji Tianxing was still unharmed. This time, Shang Yunqi, the 3 elders, and the 12 deacons opened their eyes wide and saw it clearly. Everyone was finally sure that it wasn't an illusion. It was real. Instantly, everyone was inexplicably shocked. Their hearts were in turmoil, and they couldn't help but exclaim, "Damn it! How can this be? What the hell? Why can't we hit him? Despicable beast, what kind of sorcery did he use?" While everyone was shocked, their fear grew stronger and stronger. They didn't know what to do. Shang Yunqi didn't give up. He continued to control the sect, protecting Grand Array, and attacked 8 times in a row. The result didn't change at all. He completely gave up. Knowing that Ji Tianxing was immune to all attacks, he gave up on attacking. Forget it. That kid's sorcery is too strange. No matter how we attack, it's useless. The only thing we can do now is to support the sect protecting Grand Array and stop him from breaking it. Chapter 3190. Shang Yunqi, the elders and deacons couldn't do anything to Ji Tianxing. They also understood that as long as Ji Tianxing maintained his transparent and blurry state, he would be invincible. No matter how powerful their attacks were, they couldn't hurt Ji Tianxing at all. Since that was the case, they could only stop attacking and focus on the defense of the sect. Shang Yunqi made up his mind to use the power of the sect's defensive array to compete with Ji Tianxing impatience. They would see who could last until the end. Once Ji Tianxing ran out of divine power and couldn't maintain his transparent and blurry state, it would be the best time for them to counterattack. Shang Yunqi had reason to believe that no matter how strong Ji Tianxing was, he couldn't break the sect's defensive array. He was very confident in the sect's defensive array. Together with him, the elders, deacons, disciples, and guards, they would definitely be able to defend the mountain gate. Swoosh! Swoosh! Shang Yunqi, the 3 elders, and the 12 deacons worked together to release dazzling divine light and infuse it into the sect's defensive array. Instantly, the 5-colored light shield within a radius of more than 100 miles became even more dazzling. The divine array sped up, and its power increased by 30%. Its defense also became stronger. However, the sect's defensive array only strengthened its defense and didn't release any attacks. This didn't affect Ji Tianxing much. He stood in the sky as usual and focused on breaking the divine array. He formed a divine seal with both hands and waved it as fast as lightning. He continuously shot out divine light and infused it into the various meridians and nodes of the divine array. Under his control, the sect's defensive array was disintegrating. The meridians and nodes of the array were also destroyed, and its power kept weakening. Therefore, the 2 sides engaged in a different kind of competition. Shang Yunqi, the elders and deacons worked hard to increase the power of the sect's defensive array and replenish it with divine power. Meanwhile, Ji Tianxing kept destroying the internal structure of the array, causing its power to weaken continuously. At the beginning, Shang Yunqi and the others tried their best and could barely keep up with Ji Tianxing's destructive speed. The 2 sides were barely at a stalemate. The sect's defensive array was weakening at an extremely slow speed. However, after only 30 minutes, Shang Yunqi and the others couldn't hold on any longer. They couldn't use their full power for a long period of time, so the power of the protective formation naturally weakened. Ji Tianxing, on the other hand, was as calm as ever as he broke the formation and disintegrated the structure of the formation in an orderly fashion. As a result, the speed at which the power of the sect-protecting grand formation weakened gradually increased. An hour later, Shang Yunqi, the elders, deacons, and disciples were all gasping for breath. Their faces were pale, and their backs were drenched in sweat. They had used up too much of their divine power, and their energy was somewhat empty. They were becoming more and more powerless. On the other hand, Ji Tianxing was still the same as before. His expression was calm as ever as he cast a spell to break the formation. It was as if his divine power was limitless and could never be used up. He didn't know what fatigue was. Shang Yunqi, the elders, and the deacons finally panicked, their hearts burning with anxiety. They saw with their own eyes that the five-colored brilliance of the grand protective formation grew dimmer and dimmer, and its aura grew weaker and weaker. At the same time, Ji Tianxing broke through the first layer of the formation, leaving a dent in the five-colored light barrier. It didn't take long for him to crack the second layer of the grand formation, causing the dents on the five-colored light shield to become even deeper. 2 hours passed. Ji Tianxing focused on cracking the third layer of the grand formation. This was also the last layer of the grand protective formation. Once it was broken, it would be completely finished. Shang Yunqi and the disciples of Heavenly Union's sect all had their hearts in their throats. They all let out cries of horror, despair, and worry. Many disciples and guards were cursing angrily. They were extremely agitated. Shang Yunqi's expression was very ugly. His forehead was covered in cold sweat, and his eyes kept changing. He was very anxious. Hundreds of thoughts flashed through his mind as he tried to think of a solution. What should we do? That brat is about to break the grand protective formation. Damn it. The grand protective formation of our sect is the result of the painstaking efforts of the previous sect masters. It has been strengthened and perfected countless times. How could it be broken so easily by him? That damn beast, what kind of demon is he? How can he be so abnormal? What should we do next? The sect master, the grand elder, and many elders, deacons, and elite disciples are all over at Green Jade Palace. Even if I send a message for help now, it will be too late. Could it be that I and more than 10,000 disciples and odd job workers are going to be buried here today? The sect that has been passed down for tens of thousands of years is about to be destroyed in my hands? No way. I have to think of a way. I have to save the sect and the lives of the disciples, no matter what the price is. Shang Yunqi's attitude was very firm, and so was his will. However, he could not think of any other way. In addition to him, the 3 elders, 12 deacons, the martial emperors, and the guards had the same thought too. Everyone was panicking and anxious. They were all thinking what they should do when Ji Tianxing broke the grand protective formation and charged into the sect. Should they preserve their strength and integrity, face death calmly, and fight with their lives? Or should they lose their dignity and backbone, kneel down, surrender, and beg for mercy in order to survive? Would Tianxing, the legendary cruel and bloodthirsty god of slaughter, let them go? What should they do? Hurry. Unknowingly, an hour and a half had passed. Just when everyone was at a loss for what to do, a crisp crack sound suddenly rang in the air. At that moment, everyone fell silent. Everyone's heart skipped a beat, and their expressions changed drastically as they stared at Ji Tianxing in unison. They saw that the deep dent in the five-colored light shield in front of him had cracked. It had turned into a gap that was about 3 feet long and 3 feet wide. The grand protective formation had been broken in the end. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and shot out dozens of rays of divine light, which completely tore open the gap and expanded it to a radius of 10 feet. Suddenly, the sky was filled with shards of divine light and scattered on the surface of the lake. His figure flashed, and he passed through the gap, stepped into the five-colored light shield, and went straight for the crowd. At that moment, Shang Yunqi, the 3 elders, the 12 deacons, and the thousands of disciples and guards felt their hearts stop beating. Their eyes were wide open, and they were filled with horror. Of course, everyone was only shocked for a moment before they came to their senses. Shang Yunqi and the 3 elders exclaimed in shock. They instinctively waved their swords and sabers and roared angrily as they charged toward Ji Tianxing. Thief! Don't even think about hurting the disciples of the He Tian sect. Bastard, I'll fight you to the death. Along with the earth-shattering roars, the 4 of them slashed their swords and sabers, releasing all kinds of divine powers, and charged toward Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing had no intention of stopping or dodging. He went straight for Shang Yunqi and the others, holding the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand, and sword light filled the sky. Bang! 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 Hundreds of dazzling golden sword light hit the swords and sabers in the sky, and all the divine powers were smashed into pieces. The dazzling golden sword light was intact, and it still retained 70% of its power, and it hit Shang Yunqi and the others again. With a series of muffled sounds, Shang Yunqi, the three elders, and several deacons were all sent flying by the sword light, and blood splattered across the sky. Chapter 3191. Shang Yunqi, the three elders, and several deacons flew dozens of miles away with blood spurting out of their bodies, crashing into the dense forest with a loud bang. Instantly, several large pits were smashed out of the forest, sending dust and wood chips flying all over the sky. Everyone landed in a sorry state with dusty faces and bloodstains all over their bodies. Their hearts were filled with shock. The other deacons and the thousands of disciples and guards were all shocked. All of them revealed a look of horror, their eyes filled with disbelief. Although everyone knew that Ji Tianxing's strength was very strong, they had not seen it before. They had never seen it with their own eyes, so they did not have a specific measure in their hearts. They never would have thought that Ji Tianxing was actually powerful to such an extent. Deputy Sect Master Shang Yunqi and the three elders were all veteran high-level divine lords. Their strength and foundation were very strong. And those deacons were also all 5th-level divine, Lord Realm, and above. Everyone joined forces to attack, but they could not even block one move from Ji Tianxing and were beaten until their bodies were covered in blood. What kind of terrifying combat strength was this? Looking at the entire mountain gate of He Tian's sect, who else could resist Ji Tianxing? Thinking of this, everyone's hearts were covered in a haze, their mood depressed and desperate. At this time, the other deacons also came back to their senses. They roared in grief and indignation, waving their swords and sabers to give orders. All disciples and guards, listen up. Swear to defend the dignity of He Tian's sect to the death. Kill. Our heads can be broken, blood can flow, but we would rather die standing than live kneeling. Charge. Want to destroy He Tian's sect? Then you'll have to step over our dead bodies. As they roared, the 7 deacons charged at Ji Tianxing with the mentality of facing death with equanimity. The thousands of disciples and guards were also affected by the emotions of the deacons. Everyone was filled with pessimism and despair, and they launched a suicidal attack with the determination to die. Kill. It's time to repay the sect. Never give in. Fight to the last moment. Many disciples and guards shouted heroic words and erupted with their strongest strength. Swoosh! Swoosh! Thousands of blade lights and sword shadows instantly illuminated the night sky for thousands of miles around. The entire island was illuminated, and everyone's expression could be seen clearly. Everyone joined forces to besiege Ji Tianxing, releasing saber lights and sword shadows that poured down like a torrential flood, drowning his figure. However, a scene that made everyone despair appeared. Ji Tianxing, who was still very normal just a moment ago, once again used that evil divine ability. He became transparent and blurry. The sky full of divine attacks passed through him without any hindrance and scattered on the ground. Instantly, the grasslands and forests within 100 miles were blasted into ruins, leaving behind countless deep pits and ravines. Endless dust rose into the night sky and covered the entire island. The destructive impact caused the entire island to sway and shake violently. There was no doubt about the result. The island was heavily damaged. Half of the grasslands and forests were in ruins, but Ji Tianxing was safe and sound. Seizing this opportunity, he brandished the sword of burial of heaven, and sword radiance filled the sky as he attacked the numerous disciples and guards. Bang! 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 Sword radiance flashed, and sword chi filled the sky. The night sky was in chaos, and blood splattered everywhere. The crowd was cut into pieces by the sword radiance, and countless broken limbs and blood splattered everywhere. At least 200 disciples and guard were killed on the spot by the sword radiance. Their bodies fell from the night sky and smashed into the ruins. There were even 4 unlucky deacons with the strength of a low-level divine lord who were killed on the spot by the sword radiance. In the blink of an eye, a quarter of the mighty group was gone, and their morale plummeted. Everyone was shocked and hesitant. They didn't dare to attack with all their might. At this time, the injured Shang Yunqi, 3 elders and 5 deacons charged back without any regard for their own safety. "Thief, I'll kill you. Give me your life. I'll tear you to pieces." Shang Yunqi and the others roared angrily and attacked even more crazily. They used their ultimate killing moves to besiege Ji Tianxing. This time, Ji Tianxing didn't even bother to use the everlasting sky of turbidity. He directly faced them head-on. He used his left hand to use the dragon elephant divine fist, and a mountain-sized dragon elephant image smashed everyone's divine skill into pieces. He waved his right hand and stabbed 99 times, releasing a destructive sword intent and divine power that enveloped Shang Yunqi and the others. Bang! 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 99 rainbow sword radiances tore through the night sky like lightning. They were extremely fast. Shang Yunqi and the others' divine souls were locked on, and they didn't even have a chance to escape. They were hit instantly. Bang! 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 The sword radiances pierced through everyone's divine bodies, and a series of muffled sounds echoed in the night sky. Shang Yunqi's strength was relatively strong, and he managed to dodge the attack at the crucial moment, not letting the sword light strike his head. Even so, his abdomen and thigh were pierced by 2 sword radiances. His left leg was cut off on the spot, and there was a huge bloody hole in his abdomen. It was a shocking sight. However, he was secretly glad that he managed to keep his divine body in life. The other 3 elders and 5 deacons ended up in a much more miserable state. The 5 deacons' divine bodies were pierced through by the sword radiances, and they exploded into pieces, splattering blood everywhere. Even their divine sparks were shattered by the sword radiances and scattered in the night sky. 2 of the 3 elders were also killed. Their divine bodies and divine sparks were shattered. Only 1 elder managed to survive, but his divine body was shattered, and his divine sparks escaped into the distance. Therefore, the strongest people in this team were only Shang Yunqi and the 3 deacons. The remaining 700 disciples and guards were all below the divine Lord realm. They could only be cannon fodder. For a moment, the night sky quieted down. Shang Yunqi breathed heavily as he circulated his energy to suppress his injuries. The 3 injured deacons also hurriedly took divine pills. As for the disciples and guards, they held their weapons and surrounded Ji Tianxing, but they didn't dare to attack. Both sides were in a stalemate. As long as Ji Tianxing attacked again, he would be able to kill everyone in a few moves. At this moment, a divine light that blotted out the sky lit up in the mountains 100 miles away. There were densely packed figures, like fireflies that filled the sky, rushing over while shouting. Ji Tianxing, Shang Yunqi, and the others saw clearly with a sweep of their divine senses. Those were thousands of Jointian sect disciples. Most of them were outer sect disciples, and there were also a large number of servants, guards, and odd job workers. In short, they were all a motley crew below the 7th level celestial god realm. Of course, although those 6,000 people were weak, their will was as strong as an impregnable fortress, and they charged over bravely. This made Shang Yunqi, the deacons, and disciples feel warmth in their hearts. They were touched and proud. At the very least, at the juncture of life and death, the Jointian sect disciples were very unyielding and didn't embarrass the sect. However, Shang Yunqi closed his eyes in pain, hot tears flowing down his face. He struggled painfully in his heart, and after weighing the pros and cons for a moment, he made a decision that the disciples and guards found unbelievable. Chapter 3192. Just when the deacons, disciples, and guards were feeling proud and excited, Shang Yunqi, who was at the front of the crowd, suddenly bowed deeply to Ji Tianxing. He lowered his head and suppressed the great humiliation and anger, and said in a trembling voice, "Young Master Tianxing, I admit defeat. Although it is said that you are cruel, bloodthirsty, and evil, I believe in you. However, I believe in my own judgment. I definitely won't misjudge someone. A peerless expert with such outstanding talent and tyrannical strength, like you must have the demeanor and bearing of an expert. I am willing to admit defeat on the spot. I only beg you to let these innocent disciples and guards go, and let the Hetion sect live. Although Shang Yunqi's voice was not loud, it spread clearly throughout the island. At that instant, over 700 disciples and guards were stunned on the spot, as if they had been petrified. Even the 6,000-plus disciples, guards, and odd job workers who were hurrying over a few dozen kilometers away stopped in their tracks. Everyone's faces were filled with astonishment. They thought they had misheard. Everyone could not believe that the deputy sect leader, who had always been high and mighty, actually surrendered to the enemy. Moreover, the deputy sect leader wanted to commit suicide on the spot in exchange for the lives of everyone and preserve the foundation of the Hetion sect. This was simply unbelievable. If they did not hear it with their own ears, they would never believe that these words came from the deputy sect leader's mouth. At this moment, it was not only Shang Yunqi's shame. Countless disciples, guards, and handymen of the Hetion sect, a total of more than 10,000 people, felt extremely humiliated and angry. So, after everyone came to their senses, they immediately burst into earth-shattering shouts. Countless disciples and guards desperately tried to persuade and stop Shang Yunqi. Deputy sect leader, why did you surrender to the thief? Didn't we say that we would rather die standing than live kneeling? Deputy sect leader, we can still fight. Please don't surrender. We would rather fight to the death with the enemy than surrender in humiliation. My life was given by the Hetion sect. Today, I will return it to the Hetion sect. Please allow me to fight. I will also fight to the last moment and live and die with the sect. Deputy sect leader, how can you surrender? Where's the dignity and backbone of our sect? Not only the disciples, but the 3 surviving deacons were also agitated and tried to dissuade Shang Yunqi. However, Shang Yunqi remained unmoved and continued to maintain a bowing posture. The commotion became more and more ferocious. More than 6,000 disciples and odd job workers arrived, and the scene became even more chaotic. The discussions and dissuasion of thousands of people converged into a huge sound wave torrent that was deafening. Seeing this, Shang Yunqi decisively shouted angrily, "Silence! Everyone should be quiet. Where's the decency?" The dignified and oppressive sound waves enveloped the entire island. Everyone shut their mouths, and the night sky quieted down. Shang Yunqi then looked at Ji Tianxing and earnestly said, "Young Master Tianxing, you and Grand Prince Lian have a deep enmity that will not end until one of you is dead. Prince Lian is the head disciple of our sect, so it's reasonable for you to deal with our sect. However, this is between you, Prince Lian, and us. Please do not involve the innocent disciples and odd job workers. I also understand that you want to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots to prevent future trouble. This is human nature. However, you are a top expert, and only the top divine lords are worthy of being your opponent. These 10,000 disciples, odd job workers, and servants are all old, weak, sick, and disabled. They pose no threat to you at all. You are a top expert. Don't tell me you don't even have this little bit of tolerance? Young Master Tianxing, please be merciful and allow me to kill myself on the spot, and you can leave now. Young Master, please grant my wish." Shang Yunqi's tone was very sincere, and he bowed deeply after speaking. The 6,000 disciples, guards, and odd job workers no longer clamored, discussed, or dissuaded him. No matter how stupid they were, they understood the deputy sect leader's good intentions. Sacrificing him in exchange for the survival of more than 10,000 people and preserving the foundation of the Hetion sect. This was definitely a great profit. As long as everyone was still alive, the Hetion sect still existed, and the Hetion sect would not perish. In the future, when the sect leader, grand elder, and the elites of the sect returned, the Hetion sect would be able to recover to its peak. In fact, the sect leader and grand supreme elder could even kill Tianxing to avenge those who had died. Thinking of this, everyone fell silent. Everyone looked at Shang Yunqi with eyes full of gratitude and admiration. However, Shang Yunqi's idea was good, but the decision was not in his hands. Everyone's eyes gathered on Ji Tianxing, waiting for his decision. Under the gaze of tens of thousands of people, Ji Tianxing stared at Shang Yunqi indifferently and said in a cold tone, "Shang Yunqi, you are indeed a cunning old fox. You know how to choose and weigh the pros and cons. That's right. I came today with no intention of letting you go. You will undoubtedly die, but you know that if you fight to the end, the He Tian sect will be completely wiped out and the mountain will no longer exist. At that time, you and Prince Lien will be the sinners who caused the destruction of the He Tian sect, and you will go down in history in infamy. Therefore, you choose to kill yourself on the spot. Not only can you save everyone's lives and the He Tian sect's foundation, but you can also win a good reputation. You are really calculating." Ji Tianxing exposed Shang Yunqi's thoughts, but Shang Yunqi did not refute. He bowed again and said in a sincere tone, "Young Master Tianxing, please be magnanimous and grant me my wish." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly. His lips curled into a cold smile as he said, "Good. I can grant you your wish and allow you to kill yourself on the spot. However, you have to hand over Prince Lien or tell me his whereabouts. Otherwise, I will still kill everyone here, destroy this island, and erase the name of the heavenly sect from existence." Ji Tianxing had already expected that Prince Lien might not be here. After such a long battle and such a big commotion, Prince Lien would have appeared if he was in the sect. As expected, Shang Yunqi hesitated for a moment before saying in a trembling voice, "With your strength and means, you will definitely be a top expert in the great Yin Empire in the future. I will believe you this time." Prince Lien did not return to the Thousand Sun Lake, nor is he in the sect. The last time I contacted him was 3 days ago. He said in the Jade Slip that the sect's defense is weak and might not be able to withstand your attack. Therefore, he will not return to the sect. He will find another place to hide. That's all I know." Ji Tianxing immediately frowned and sneered disdainfully. "Shang Yunqi, do you still dare to hide the truth from me? I will give you one last chance. You know what I mean?" Shang Yunqi's expression changed, and he frowned deeply. His eyes were filled with melancholy and struggle. Although what he said was the truth, he did have some reservations and didn't reveal everything. Since Ji Tianxing was so shrewd, he could not hide it anymore. He could only send a voice transmission. "Young Master Tianxing, I really don't know where Prince Lien is. He is very cautious. How can he tell me this secret that concerns his life? However, I can tell you that he only has 3 choices now." Chapter 3193. Prince Lien was cautious and suspicious. He knew that Ji Tianxing would attack a Tian sect, so how could he tell Shang Yunqi the escape route? However, Shang Yunqi knew Prince Lien very well and knew some of his secrets. At this critical juncture, Shang Yunqi had to tell the truth to save the lives of the 10,000 disciples and Hatian sect's tens of thousands of years of history. Prince Lien's first choice was to not tell anyone and hide in a remote place where he could slowly build up his strength. As long as he doesn't show up, the great Yin Empire is so vast that you won't be able to find him. His second choice was to escape to Pure Wind Prefecture. Many years ago, he secretly built a palace in a secret realm in Pure Wind Prefecture so that he could take refuge in an emergency. He thought that he was very secretive and that we didn't know. Actually, the sect leader and I both know about this. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows, and a trace of dissatisfaction flashed in his eyes. This was because he could guess the 2 choices that Shang Yunqi had mentioned. When he had refined Lien Heir's soul memories, he had learned many of Prince Lien's secrets. One of them was the palace in a secret realm in Pure Wind Prefecture. Ji Tianxing frowned at Shang Yunqi and asked, "What about the third choice?" "This." Shang Yunqi hesitated and stammered. Prince Lien's third choice was, of course, to seek protection from the sect leader. He is the last disciple of the sect leader, so the sect leader will protect him no matter what. "You can shut up now." Ji Tianxing sneered and glanced at Shang Yunqi coldly. Obviously, Shang Yunqi was hiding the truth again. Ji Tianxing exposed him mercilessly and sneered. Now that things have come to this, you still want to hide the news of the Green Jade Palace? I know that Prince Lian has most likely gone to Hetian Sek's sect leader. However, Hetian Sek's sect leader and Grand Elder, as well as many elders, deacons, and elite disciples, are guarding the Green Jade Palace. Suddenly hearing these words, Shang Yunqi was stunned on the spot. His eyes widened, revealing a face full of shock. He did not dare to believe that Ji Tianxing actually knew this secret. That's not right. How could you possibly know about the Green Jade Palace? The 50 factions had formed an alliance, and they would all keep it secret. They wouldn't dare to leak it out. How did you know? It must be one of the powers that went against the agreement. Ji Tianxing sneered. That's right. It was one of those forces that leaked this secret to me. The one who leaked the news is none other than the Hetian sect. This is impossible, Shang Yunqi said angrily in a low voice. Even among the disciples of our sect, only those who stayed in the Green Jade Palace know this secret. Other than that, there's only me and the 3 elders. No one can reveal the secret. You're lying. Ji Tianxing lost interest in talking and said coldly, Shang Yunqi, this monarch is very disappointed in you. You seem to be very sincere. You want to use your life to exchange for everyone's life, and you also want to protect the foundation of the Hetian sect. But in reality, you've been hiding the truth from me. As for the 3 choices you mentioned, this monarch already knew about them and already had an answer in his heart. Now, you haven't fulfilled my request, so... Hearing this, Shang Yunqi's expression changed dramatically, and his eyes widened in horror. He glared at Ji Tianxing and roared at the top of his lungs, No, Tianxing, you can't go back on your words, and go back on your words. You've already agreed to my request in front of everyone. Now you want to go back on your words? Aren't you afraid of being ridiculed by the world and sullied your reputation? Moreover, the 3 possibilities I told you have a high chance of success. That's the only place left for Prince Lian. Fortunately, the 2 of them had been talking through telepathy, and no one else had heard it. Otherwise, there were more than 6,000 disciples, guards, and odd job workers present. Once the news of the Green Jade Palace was leaked, it would quickly spread. At that time, the 50 factions alliance would be destroyed, and it would lead to disputes and chaos. If the various factions traced the source and found out that it was the Hetian sect who leaked the news, the result could be imagined. The Hetian sect would not only be expelled from the 50 factions, but they would also become the target of public criticism. In any case, Shang Yunqi could not bear this responsibility. Ji Tianxing stared at Shang Yunqi sharply and said in a deep voice, Shang Yunqi, I did promise you and give you a chance. But that's based on the fact that you don't hold anything back and are honest and straightforward. Unfortunately, you've been hiding the truth and trying to deceive me. Don't blame me for being ruthless. Shang Yunqi was trembling with anger, and his face was pale. He shouted angrily, Then what do you want? Ji Tianxing said in a dignified tone, It's very simple. Either you kill yourself, and I'll leave after killing all 6,000 people present. The remaining 10,000 people and the Hetian sect's wealth will all be preserved. Or you resist, and I'll kill everyone, completely destroy this island, and the Hetian sect. Shang Yunqi was so angry that his eyes almost popped out. He shouted, You've gone too far. So what? Ji Tianxing sneered contemptuously. Don't forget your situation. The decision is in my hands, and your life and death are in my hands. Shang Yunqi was speechless for a moment. He was so angry that he could not speak. However, he also understood that what Ji Tianxing said was reasonable. If he was Ji Tianxing, he would not even give the chance to kill himself. He would definitely kill everyone and destroy the Hetian sect. Cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots was a wise move. Ji Tianxing was willing to give him a chance and preserve the Hetian sect's wealth. This was already very benevolent. After a long silence, Shang Yunqi's anger gradually dissipated. He seemed to have been drained of all his strength. He raised his head in a daze and glanced at the audience with dim eyes. Finally, His gaze returned to Ji Tianxing, and he smiled bitterly. You win. Everyone here, and I will all die. But this is the bottom line of the He Tian sect. Please keep your promise. Otherwise, even if we die, we will curse you forever. Ji Tianxing sneered. No matter what, I have a bottom line more than all of you. Hearing this, Shang Yunqi was relieved. He smiled hopelessly and said, Thank you, goodbye. When his voice fell, he used all his power to shatter his godhead. Bang! With a muffled sound, his body exploded on the spot and blood splattered all over the sky. 12 pieces of godhead shards also flew in the blood rain and scattered in the night sky. The deputy sect master of the He Tian sect, an 8th-degree realm upper divine monarch, committed suicide in front of everyone. More than 6,000 disciples, guards, and odd job workers roared in pain, anger, and unwillingness. Countless people's eyes were scarlet red. They waved their swords wildly and charged towards Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing did not waste any time. He waved his hand and activated the Heaven Punishment Sword Array, summoning 25,000 divine swords. They covered the sky and covered the earth, enveloping everyone in the field. Chapter 3194. Bang, 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 bang. The sky was full of divine swords, blooming with dazzling divine light, drowning more than 6,000 people. Tens of thousands of swords shuttled back and forth, sword chi crisscrossing the area within 100 miles. Deafening muffled sounds, painful screams, and angry shouts converged into a huge sound wave torrent, shaking the entire island. Such a terrifying movement lasted for a full 10 breaths before gradually dissipating. More than 100 miles away, the tens of thousands of people hiding in the mountain gate of the He Tian sect trembled in fear when they saw the sword light that blotted out the sky. They didn't know the specific situation and only thought that Ji Tianxing was on a killing spree and that no one could stop him. The experts and elite disciples guarding the sect were all dead. Even the outer sect disciples, guards, and handymen with average combat strength were slaughtered. The remaining tens of thousands of people were old, weak, sick, and disabled, and their strength was not worth mentioning. They all had a premonition that when Ji Tianxing came, they would die without a burial place. Therefore, an atmosphere of despair shrouded the entire He Tian sect. However, the development of things was not what they expected. After 10 breaths, the tens of thousands of giant swords that blotted out the sky disappeared. Heaven and earth returned to silence. More than 6,000 disciples, guards, and handymen were turned into a rain of blood and powder, scattered in the ruins. They were all dead, and no one was left alive. Only a white-robed figure was left, standing alone in the night sky. He glanced at the mountain gate of the He Tian sect, turned around, and quickly disappeared into the night sky. There was a dead silence in the mountain gate. Tens of thousands of people held their breath, waiting for death to come. 20 breaths, 50 breaths, 100 breaths passed. The entire island was silent, and there was no divine light or sound. That frightening white-robed figure also disappeared without a trace. Nearly 10,000 disciples and servants of the He Tian sect gradually came to their senses. The fear and despair in their hearts slowly dissipated, and many people tried to fly out of the mountain gate to explore the outside world with their divine sense. When they found that Ji Tianxing had left the island, they immediately burst into cheers of joy. Countless people showed a relieved expression, and their faces were full of the joy of surviving a disaster. The black divine ship flew in the night sky, heading straight to the east. In the cockpit of the divine warship, Ji Tianxing sat at the side, silently thinking about something. Lin Shui was in charge of steering the ship, but she was not focused. She kept turning her head to observe Ji Tianxing's reaction. The atmosphere had been silent for an hour. Shui Lin finally couldn't help but ask, Hey, did you really keep your promise and let go of the Heavenly Union sect? That was tens of thousands of people, as well as countless resources and wealth. In any case, you already have a death feud with the He Tian sect. How can you let them go? Aren't you too stupid? Ji Tianxing was still thinking about the problem and did not answer. Lin Shui was so angry that she snorted and said gloomily, "Fine. I know you're a peerless genius, a peerless expert. In the future, your name will definitely spread throughout the Northern Heaven region. As a super monster, of course you would cherish your reputation and wouldn't be willing to be a treacherous villain. But have you ever thought about it? Hetian's sect master and the elite powerhouses are still alive. When they find out about what happened tonight, they will definitely seek you for revenge. If you show mercy to the people of the Hetian sect, you're being cruel to yourself." Ji Tianxing did not want to listen to her nagging anymore. He could not help but say, "There are more than 10,000 people from the Hetian sect. Those who could fight were killed by me. Those who are still alive are as weak as ants. They're no threat to us. Let's put aside the matter between Prince Lien and the Hetian sect for now. Focus on steering the ship. We'll head to the imperial capital as soon as possible." Lin Shui frowned and asked, "What's the matter? Why do you have to go to the imperial capital? You know the Emperor of Great Yin is wary of you. If you appear in the imperial capital, he'll definitely explode." "So what?" Ji Tianxing raised an eyebrow and said nonchalantly, "I'm not going to do anything to him. I'm just asking him about something. Only an expert on the level of the Emperor of Great Yin can answer my questions." Lin Shui nodded, half understanding. She said helplessly, "All right. Since you insist on going, what can I do? What about after you're done in the imperial capital? Where do you plan to go?" Ji Tianxing replied without hesitation, "I'm going to look for Prince Lien, of course." Lin Shui asked with a puzzled expression, "I've asked you a few times, but you wouldn't tell me. Where are the sect master of the Hetian sect and the elites of the Hetian sect hiding? What are they doing? If you didn't show mercy, their base would have been destroyed. Why aren't they sending reinforcements? Could it be that what they're doing is more important than the Hetian sect's tens of thousands of years of foundation?" Ji Tianxing nodded solemnly. Lin Shui was even more surprised. She asked in disbelief, "Are you serious? What are they doing?" Ji Tianxing explained, "In the northwest of the Great Yin Empire, in the depths of the Cloud Sea Mystic Realm, a God King's cave abode was discovered." Suddenly hearing this news, Shui Lin's eyes widened, revealing an extremely shocked expression. Then, realization dawned on her face. She nodded and said, "I see. No wonder the sect master of the Hetian sect took away most of the elites and left their base behind. It's a God King's cave abode. If the Hetian sect successfully enters the cave abode and obtains the God King's inheritance, divine weapons, and secret techniques, that's terrifying. It won't be long before the Hetian sect can nurture a God King. There's no God King in the entire Great Yin Empire. Once the Hetian sect has a God King, they'll be able to dominate the Great Yin Empire and even replace it." Shui Lin was well aware of the stakes involved. She knew better than anyone how attractive a God King's cave abode was. However, Ji Tianxing added, "The God King's cave abode is called the God King's cave abode. It's the God King's cave abode. It's the God King's cave abode from 10,000 years ago. The God King came from the Great Yin Empire and was famous in the northern region. However, he disappeared 10,000 years ago. The first to discover the God King's cave abode was from the other factions. When the news spread, all the top factions in the Great Yin Empire wanted a piece of the pie. Even the Great Yin imperial family wanted to take it for themselves. However, more than 40 factions resisted stubbornly. The Great Yin imperial family had no choice but to compromise. In the end, 50 factions formed an alliance and joined forces to explore the God King's cave abode. They've been researching it for more than 9 years. When she heard this, Lin Shui was taken aback. She frowned with a strange expression. Is there something wrong with the sect master of the Hetian sect? What are the chances of the Hetian sect succeeding when 50 factions are fighting over the God King's Green Jade Palace? Is it necessary to give up their base just for the God King's Green Jade Palace? Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, "You're wrong. The 50 factions are divided into their strengths and weaknesses. There's no doubt that the Great Yin imperial family is the most powerful, followed by the 9 great sects and the noble clans. These 10 factions are the most powerful ones. The other 40 factions are just there to serve as a contrast. Moreover, after the 50 alliances open the God King's Green Jade Palace, they won't swarm in. They'll draw lots and compete to select a portion of them to enter the palace. Chapter 3195. After listening to Ji Tianxing's explanation, Lin Shui roughly understood. She nodded slightly and said, I see. In other words, the top 10 factions will most likely be able to enter the Divine Palace. As for the other 40 factions, they're just there to serve as a foil. It will be very difficult for them to enter the Divine Palace. The Heavenly Unity Sect is one of the top 10 factions and has more than a 90% chance of entering the Divine Palace. Therefore, the Heavenly Unity Sect Master treats the Green Jade Palace as a treasure that can turn the situation around and refuses to give it up. That's right. Ji Tianxing nodded and added, to the Heavenly Unity Sect Master, as long as he and the elite forces are still there, the Heavenly Unity Sect will not be destroyed. Most of the people guarding the sect are burdens and trash. They will not feel bad even if they die. When he enters the Green Jade Palace and obtains the Green Jade Supreme Being's inheritance and mystic techniques, the Heavenly Unity Sect will be able to rise again. By then, the Heavenly Unity Sect will be even more glorious and powerful. It will not be a problem to recruit as many disciples, guards, and servants as it wants. Lin Shui pursed her lips and said disdainfully, in that case, the Heavenly Unity Sect Master is really a good-for-nothing. He doesn't care about the lives of his disciples at all. Ji Tianxing chuckled and said, do you think everyone is as stupid as you? Before disbanding the Bloodblade sect, you gave away all your wealth? Lin Shui's pretty face turned red, but she straightened her neck and asked, so what? I gave away my wealth. Who can stop me? Ji Tianxing was speechless. Lin Shui had won the argument. Seeing his helpless and bitter smile, she was very pleased and proud. At the same time, at the northwest border of the Great Yin Empire, there was a region of clouds that spanned 1,000,000 miles. There were endless mountains and forests in the world, but they were all covered by clouds. This region was called the Cloud Sea Mystic Realm. This mystic realm was very special. It looked like it was formed by clouds, and there was nothing special about it. However, in fact, this cloud sea had existed for tens of thousands of years and had never disappeared. The cloud sea contained a special power that seemed to be able to distort space. Countless experts had entered it, but it was as if they had fallen into a maze and could not walk out. Those who had specially entered the cloud sea to take the risk to explore the secret of the cloud sea often did not know how to do it. Once they entered the sea of clouds, they would lose their sense of direction. It would be difficult for them to distinguish north from south, front from back, left from right. After making a few rounds and flying for a certain distance, he would strangely appear outside the cloud sea. If that was all there was to it, the sea of clouds wouldn't be attractive enough. It would just be a little strange. However, in the tens of thousands of years since ancient times, there were always some lucky people who managed to enter the cloud sea secret realm and leave alive. Moreover, they had obtained all sorts of fortuitous encounters in the cloud sea secret realm. Some people picked up the secrets of divine abilities, some obtained half of a divine art, some picked up divine weapons, some gained enlightenment, and some were enlightened by the divine king in their dreams, of course. There were also people who obtained powerful divine beasts or rare treasures in the Cloud Sea secret realm. Most of the various legends have been verified and proved to be real. This attracted countless supreme Tao powerhouses to advance dauntlessly and enter the Cloud Sea secret realm to explore. Even if 70 to 80% of the people who entered the secret realm would die, it could not stop the greed of the adventurers. At this moment, in the deepest part of the Cloud Sea secret realm, the blazing sun shone on the boundless sea of clouds, causing the sea of clouds to be hazy with 5 colors. It was magnificent and magnificent. In the middle of the brilliant halo, there was a transparent, illusory, and hazy divine palace, emitting a faint divine light. It was impossible to see the shadow of the divine palace from 1,000 miles away. Even if it was 1,000 miles away, it could not be seen clearly. It was blurry and hazy. The image of the mysterious divine palace was like a mirage. It was close at hand, but it was far away and untouchable. Outside the lofty divine palace, there were tall and solemn palace walls. In the sea of clouds surrounding the palace walls, there were 50 balls of 5-colored divine light scattered. There were hundreds to thousands of people in each 5-colored light shield. They were all elite powerhouses and powerhouses. Obviously, those were the 50 powerhouses of the Alliance, the most powerful forces of the Great Yin Empire. The gate of the palace walls had long been opened, and the defense divine array had been broken. Close to 100 Sir God powerhouses with different appearances and extraordinary clothes were surrounding the huge bronze gate of the divine palace. Although there were many people, the scene was very quiet and not noisy. Many of the overlords looked serious and focused. They silently observed the huge bronze gate and whispered a few words occasionally. Yi Wuji, the sect master of the Hetian sect, was also among the crowd. He was fully focused on observing the defense divine array. Many people thought that the sect master of the Hetian sect must be a white-haired elder. Even if he was a bit younger, he would be a middle-aged divine clan member. But in fact, Yi Wuji had a technique to retain his youthful appearance. He looked like he was only about 30 years old. He was wearing a dark purple robe embroidered with fire phoenixes and golden patterns. He was tall and strong, and his face was handsome and resolute. He exuded the majesty and dominance of a superior, even though he and Prince Lien were master and disciple. When the two of them stood together, they looked more like brothers. At this moment, a white-haired elder in a purple robe hurried to the huge bronze gate with a serious expression. He came to Yi Wuji with a serious face, bowed respectfully, and said, "Sect Master, something bad has happened." This fat white-haired elder was the Grand Elder of the Hetian sect and Yi Wuji's right-hand man. Yi Wuji's thoughts were interrupted by the Grand Elder, but he didn't get angry. He turned around and glanced at the Grand Elder. Seeing the Grand Elder's pale face and the sadness and anger in his eyes, Yi Wuji raised his eyebrows. "Grand Elder, you're so old, but you still don't have enough patience. Although you're trying your best to suppress the anger and murderous intent in your heart. But people with discerning eyes can still see some clues." Yi Wuji turned around and continued to stare at the huge bronze gate, carefully observing the divine array. Seeing his reaction, the Grand Elder became anxious. He couldn't help but say in a more serious tone, "Sect Master, something big has really happened. Why are you still in the mood to educate me?" Yi Wuji turned his back to him and asked calmly, "What happened? Was Yonglian killed on the way? Or did God of killing Tianxing break into the Thousand Sun Lake?" The Grand Elder couldn't wait to say, "Last night, that bastard broke into the Thousand Sun Lake, broke the sect-protecting array of our sect, and killed more than 7,000 people. The 3 elders, 12 deacons, and all the elite disciples, outer disciples, and guards who stayed in the sect were all killed. Even the vice sect master was forced to commit suicide in public by that bastard." Yi Wuji couldn't help but tremble when he heard the news. No matter how calm Yi Wuji was, he couldn't help but tremble. His calm face froze in an instant. He narrowed his eyes, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. If one looked closely, they would find that his eyes were full of shock and disbelief. However, other than that, Yi Wuji didn't have any other reaction. After 3 breaths of silence, he suppressed his surprise and anger and said in a low voice, "All of us underestimated that guy. He deserves the title of God of Killing." Chapter 3196. The first elder was stunned for a moment, and then his expression became very interesting. He said subconsciously, "Sect Master, what kind of situation is this? Aren't you angry at all? He invaded our mountain gate and killed thousands of our disciples, guards, and servants. How can you still be in the mood to praise him?" The first elder couldn't understand Yi Wuji's calmness, and his tone was a little impatient. He even seemed to be blaming Yi Wuji for what he had done. Yi Wuji glanced at him expressionlessly and said in a cold voice, "I'm just telling the truth and lamenting. What's wrong with that? Also, the vice sect master killed himself in public to protect the sect's foundation and disciples. Although this was heroic and worthy of praise, it was also his duty. I'll give him a posthumous title at my discretion. As for the 6,000 disciples, guards, and servants, it doesn't matter if they're killed. We can recruit more in the future. The main elite force of our sect is here. We'll rise again soon. The first elder was speechless. He didn't know how to refute. In fact, he also knew that the 10,000 people who stayed in the sect weren't important to the Hittian sect. As long as the main elite force was still there, even if the 10,000 people were killed and the mountain gate was destroyed, the Hittian sect could still rise again. At this time, Yuwuji added in a calm tone, "Also, our mountain gate is still there, and there are still more than 10,000 people alive. Although the loss this time is heavy, it's not enough to hurt our sect." Hearing this, the first elder was obviously stunned. He asked subconsciously, "Sect Master, how do you know the mountain gate is still there? I haven't reported this yet." Yuwuji stared at the giant bronze gate attentively and said without turning his head, "Actually, you've already reported it. If the mountain gate was destroyed and everyone was killed, you would be even angrier than now. Moreover, the moment you open your mouth, you will say that Tian Xing destroyed Thousand Sun Island, killed everyone, and destroyed the foundation of our sect. But you only said that he broke into Thousand Sun Island, broke the sect's protective formation, and killed more than 6,000 people." After hearing his explanation, the first elder finally understood. He couldn't help but nod and say, "Sect Master is indeed very meticulous. I admire you." Yuwuji ignored his flattery and continued, "What's more, I had expected this result and guessed that Tianxing wouldn't kill all of us. After all, he was a monstrous genius whose name had spread throughout the various divine kingdoms. It was only natural that he cherished his reputation. The vice-sect leader had already committed suicide in front of everyone, so how could he kill the old, the weak, the sick, and the disabled? Furthermore, Tianxing only had a deep hatred for Yonglian. He did not have any blood feud with our sect. His goal is everlasting union. He won't exterminate our sect. Leave some leeway for everything so that we can meet again in the future. If he really destroyed Thousand Sun Island and killed everyone, our sect would not rest until he was dead. He didn't have to do that." After hearing Yuwuji's analysis, the first elder felt relieved and understood many things. He pondered in silence for a moment before nodding and saying, "No wonder Sect Master knew that Tianxing would kill Thousand Sun Island, but didn't send anyone back to help. So, you've already expected this result, and everything is under your control." Yuwuji continued, "The reason why Tianxing did this was to show off his power and warn me not to meddle in other people's business. After he left Thousand Sun Lake, he should have gone to search for Yonglian's whereabouts. Only a few people know that Yonglian is secretly heading to the Cloud Sea secret realm. However, Tianxing's methods are unpredictable. Perhaps he has also received this news. I have reason to believe that Tianxing might have chased Yonglian all the way to the Cloud Sea secret realm." The first elder's expression changed, revealing a gloomy and vicious expression. He grinned hideously and said, "That bastard dares to come here. Let's cut him into pieces and avenge our disciples." Yuwuji nodded slightly and said, 50 top forces are gathered here. If Tianxing doesn't know the truth and chases Yonglian all the way here, then he is courting death. All right, keep an eye on Yonglian's movements and be ready to help him at any time. I need to continue studying the formation of the gate of the Divine Palace. If there's nothing important, don't disturb me." The first elder got the answer he wanted, and his anger dissipated a little. He said yes and turned to leave. 5 days passed quickly. That evening, 2 important things happened at the same time. First, Prince Lien had been hiding and advancing secretly all the way until he finally arrived at the Cloud Sea secret realm. When he met up with the elite forces of the Hittian sect, his half-month-long escape ended. Seeing the many elites of the Hittian sect and the dozens of top forces in the Cloud Sea, Prince Lien heaved a sigh of relief. In his opinion, the Cloud Sea secret realm was now the safest place in the Great Yin Empire. Not to mention that Tianxing didn't know his whereabouts. Even if he chased him all the way here, he wouldn't be afraid. The second thing, Ji Tianxing successfully arrived at the great Yin city at sunset. Under the dim yellow sunset, the majestic imperial city with a radius of 800 miles stood among the vast mountains. There were continuous mountain ranges all around, and huge peaks that were 30,000 feet tall could be seen everywhere. The pure white clouds formed a sea of clouds halfway up the mountain. It was a magnificent sight. The great Yin Empire's capital was among the mountains. There were 18 huge peaks around it, and above them was a vast sea of clouds. The divine power of heaven and earth gathered here, and it was the most precious land within 100 million miles. It was different from the other imperial cities that Ji Tianxing had seen. The imperial city of the great Yin Empire was actually circular. The surrounding city walls were 1,000 feet tall and 100 feet thick. The walls were built with huge stones, and the surface was modeled with traces of vicissitudes. There was a tall city gate in each of the 4 cardinal directions, and a large number of city guards guarded it day and night. One had to check their identity tokens and pay a certain amount of divine stones to enter the imperial city. In addition, the 4 city gates would be closed late at night, and no one would be allowed to enter or leave. Ji Tianxing had already prepared a large number of identity tokens in his spatial ring. Some were from the Bloodfire Divine Nation, some were from the Raging Flame Divine Nation, and all kinds of identities. Lin Shui and the others stayed in the Divine Battleship, while Ji Tianxing took the Divine Battleship and walked down the city gate alone. Originally, he could change his appearance and disguise himself as a member of the divine race and sneak into the imperial city. However, he didn't choose to do that. He maintained his original appearance and calmly walked through the city gate. Stop! Without a doubt, 2 city guards in black armor stopped him with halberds. Show us your identity token. The 2 city guards sized up Ji Tianxing with scrutinizing and vigilant eyes. After all, 99% of the people who entered the imperial city were members of the divine race. Ji Tianxing, a member of the divine race, was very conspicuous. He raised his hand with an indifferent expression. With a flip of his palm, he took out a dark red identity token. This was the identity token of the Raging Flame Divine Nation, and his identity was that of a sect master. The 2 city guards repeatedly checked the identity token, sized up Ji Tianxing, and secretly discussed a few words through voice transmission. Suddenly, their expressions changed. One of the city guards suddenly shouted coldly, "Men, capture him!" Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 3197. The sudden shout caused a commotion at the city gate. Hundreds of Protoss who were entering and leaving the city were originally lined up in an orderly manner. Suddenly, a large number of city guards pulled out their swords and surrounded Ji Tianxing with murderous intent. Everyone hurriedly dodged and cried out in alarm. However, it was human nature to watch a show. Many Protoss who were entering and leaving the city retreated to the edge of the city gate and poked their heads out to look at the encirclement to see what was happening. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of city guards surrounded Ji Tianxing and pointed their swords at him. The leader of the silver-armored captains walked in front of him with a dignified expression and sized him up with sharp eyes. While observing him, the silver-armored captain took out a jade slip and used his consciousness to check the portrait in the jade slip and compare it with Ji Tianxing. After 3 short breaths, the silver-armored captain confirmed the answer and put away the jade slip. He stared coldly at Ji Tianxing and grinned coldly. "God of slaughter, Tianxing, how dare you come to the imperial capital? You're courting death." Ji Tianxing glanced at him and said indifferently, "Although I don't care to bicker with ants, you'd better be polite. If you speak rudely again, don't blame me for being ruthless." The silver-armored captain was obviously stunned when he heard this. When he reacted, he laughed out of anger and scolded contemptuously. "Ha ha ha! Did I hear wrong? You dare to threaten me in the imperial capital? You lowly alien, don't think you're so great just because you have some strength. I'm telling you, no matter how capable you are, you'll have to surrender and accept the punishment of the Empire's law when you come to the imperial capital. Don't put on airs in front of me. I've seen high-ranking officials dignitaries, and experts, and compared to you, the silver-armored captain was the captain of the city guards. He seemed to be a small official, but he guarded the city gate and held great power. He had always been arrogant and domineering. Moreover, the experts of the 18 divine nations who came to Great Yan's imperial capital were weaker and more tolerant. Under such circumstances, the silver-armored captain did not take Ji Tianqing seriously. Even when he heard that god of slaughter Tianqing had attacked Thousand Sun Lake and killed thousands of heavenly sect disciples, he did not take it to heart. After all, no matter how powerful an expert was, he had to tuck his tail between his legs when he came to the imperial capital. This was a principle that had never changed. However, the silver-armored captain did not know that he had kicked an iron plate this time. Before he finished speaking, Ji Tianqing frowned and released his invisible divine might to suppress him. The silver-armored captain's voice came to an abrupt halt. His face instantly turned deathly pale, and his knees gave way as he knelt on the ground. Thud! A muffled sound reverberated under the city imperial capital's gate. The silver-armored captain knelt in front of Ji Tianqing's feet and buried his head in his chest, looking like he was admitting his mistake. Of the city guards of the imperial capital, even the surrounding god race clansmen were dumbfounded as they looked on in disbelief. No one would have thought that the foreign race's white-robed youth would be so arrogant and domineering. He dared to threaten the captain of the city guards. Moreover, the white-robed youth did not even raise his hand and made the silver-armored captain kneel. How shocking was that? Instantly, a series of discussions and exclamations erupted from the crowd. The silver-armored captain was sweating profusely. He was terrified and humiliated. He was so angry that he trembled. He wanted to shout loudly for the surrounding city guards to charge forward and capture Ji Tianqing. However, under Ji Tianqing's divine might, he could not make a sound at all. Even moving his fingers was difficult. Fortunately, the hundreds of city guards came to their senses and roared angrily. "Bastard! What did you do to our captain? You are indeed a despicable foreign race. How dare you sneak attack our captain?" This bastard openly attacked the city guards and committed a crime of rebellion. Everyone attacked together and kill him. As they roared, the hundreds of city guards attacked at the same time. They waved their swords and sabers and charged toward Ji Tianqing. Although these city guards only had the strength of a heavenly god. However, they had the advantage in numbers. When they attacked at the same time, it was also mighty and powerful. It looked like Ji Tianqing was about to be drowned in the sword light and saber shadows and be blasted into pieces on the spot. The surrounding god clan members all screamed in horror and retreated in a panic, afraid that they would be affected. However, the outcome that everyone expected did not happen. A strange scene appeared. No one knew what kind of ultimate skill Ji Tianqing used. The surrounding space distorted and fluctuated, forming a pitch-black vortex. The sword light and saber shadows and divine skill attacks that filled the sky were all swallowed by the pitch-black vortex and disappeared completely. He was not injured at all and easily neutralized everyone's attacks. At the same time, he released an invisible divine might all over his body. It erupted like raging waves and spread in all directions. Boom! With a muffled explosion, the invisible divine might sent hundreds of city guards flying. Everyone vomited blood and flew out backward. They rolled 1,000 feet away and fell to the ground dizzily. A series of muffled thuds came out, mixed with the people's screams and cries of pain. Many city guards were knocked unconscious on the spot. They lay on the ground and did not move at all. A small number of city guards were seriously injured, lying on the ground and wailing, directly losing the ability to fight. Seeing this scene, the silver-armored captain was dumbfounded on the spot, revealing a horrified expression. The surrounding god clan members had long been scared out of their wits and fled in all directions. While fleeing in all directions in a panic, those god clan members still called for help in a panic, shouting things like someone is rebelling, a villain is barging into the city gate, and so on. For a moment, it was a mess under the city gate. There was a clamor of voices. Ji Tianxing could not be bothered. He casually knocked the silver-armored captain unconscious and stepped into the city gate. After entering the imperial capital, he walked along the straight main road and walked toward the center of the city. His expression was calm and composed. His pace was neither fast nor slow. It was as though nothing had happened, and he was just taking a leisurely stroll in the courtyard. However, what happened under the city gate had long been passed down through the layers and was known by many city guards. Even the imperial guards in the imperial palace had heard the news. However, Ji Tianxing was not worried at all. This was exactly what he wanted. Before coming to Great Yan's imperial capital, Lin Shui had asked him how he planned to sneak into the imperial capital. At that time, Ji Tianxing revealed a playful smile and said, "Why do you want to sneak in? My goal in the imperial capital is the imperial palace and Great Yan's emperor. If I sneak into the city, won't I have to find a way to sneak into the imperial palace? That's too troublesome. I'll enter the imperial capital openly and look for Great Yan's emperor directly." Lin Shui was stunned. She said with a stunned expression, "Are you crazy? Won't you become the target of public criticism and have an open confrontation with Great Yan's emperor?" Ji Tianxing shook his head and said with a faint smile, "If I sneak into the imperial capital, Great Yan's emperor will be on tenterhooks and go all out to deal with me. If I enter openly, he'll let his guard down and sit down with me to negotiate. You don't understand the logic behind this." Chapter 3198. Humph. Why don't you tell me? Why don't I understand? Lin Shui was naturally unconvinced, her tone somewhat depressed. Ji Tianxing did not explain to her, just said with a light smile, "You slowly figure it out yourself." Lin Shui was even more depressed, but it was not good to ask him the reason, lest she be laughed at by him. She fell into silence, secretly pondering the reason. Ji Tianxing walked along the avenue, filled with fire parasol trees on both sides, walking toward the square in the middle of the imperial city. The speed of the news spreading was far faster than him walking. Along the way, the divine race citizens on the avenue all avoided him in time when they saw him, scattering in all directions. Countless people knew that a great battle took place under the city gates. A white-robed, black-haired foreign race youth instantly killed hundreds of city guards and swaggered into the imperial city. Although everyone believed that audacious fellow would be taken down by the imperial guards very soon, the imperial guards had not arrived yet. However, before the imperial guard arrived, no one dared to get too close to Ji Tianxing. If they were to suffer a calamity and be casually insta-killed by Ji Tianxing, then their deaths would be too unjust. However, many of the divine race citizens retreated to the two sides of the avenue, hiding under the big trees and inside the houses and palaces. Seeing Ji Tianxing walk with a calm expression without any signs of starting a massacre, everyone heaved a sigh of relief, as if relieved of a heavy burden. They hid in the shadows and observed Ji Tianxing, whispering to each other and discussing. "Who is that fellow? Why did he trespass into the imperial city?" Even a 3-year-old child knows that attacking the city guards and forcefully barging into the city gates is an unpardonable capital offense. Is that fellow tired of living? Looking at his appearance and bearing, his strength is also very powerful. He doesn't look like a lunatic? Could it be that fellow is relying on his valiant strength and wants to openly challenge the imperial family's dignity? Since ancient times, people or forces that dare to go against the imperial family, no matter how powerful, have mostly been annihilated. He's alone and dares to challenge the imperial family? Isn't that a mayfly trying to shake a tree, a mantis trying to stop a chariot? Quickly look. Everyone quickly look. The city guards and imperial guards are all here. Suddenly, someone in the crowd let out a cry of joy. Immediately, countless people looked toward the center of the city. He only saw a dazzling 5-color divine light in the sky, flying over at lightning speed. Inside the huge 5-color divine light, there were hundreds of elite warriors in dark red armor, carrying swords and halberds. There was a total of 400 experts in red armor. Their strength was at least at the 8th level of the heavenly god realm. Moreover, they were well trained. With such eye-catching attire, unique appearance, and aura, they were none other than the Imperial Guards of Great Yan's imperial family. On the other side, in the southeast direction of the Imperial City, there was also a dazzling five-color divine light that was rushing over as fast as lightning. That ball of divine light was like a cloud. Within it, there were thousands of figures. All of them were experts in black armor and wielding sabers and swords. These black-armored warriors were all 6th level heavenly god realm and above. The powerhouses in the team, there were 10 first and 2nd level divine lord realm captains, and even a 5th level divine lord realm commander. Upon seeing this scene, the god race citizens on both sides of the road exclaimed in surprise, revealing expressions of excitement and anticipation. Wow, the Imperial Guards and City Guards moved out together. Looks like the situation is dire. There's so many City Guards and Imperial Guards here. That brat is dead meat. From the moment that brat barged into the city gates, he's already a dead man. Say, do you think the City Guards or the Imperial Guards will make a move later? Although the Imperial Guards are under His Majesty's command and have a higher status, that brat is the brat's face. He's slapping the City Guards in the face. I'm sure the City Guards will want to save face and make a move first, right? We're in for a good show now. I wonder how long that brat can last under the siege of the City Guards. I bet 10 breaths of time. I think 3 breaths of time is enough. Haha, I bet they won't fight. That brat will surrender before the City Guards make a move. There were thousands of God Race citizens gathered on both sides of the road. They discussed among themselves as though they were gloating and waiting to watch a good show. The atmosphere was rather cheerful. Soon after, the Imperial Guards arrived first. Swoosh! The rainbow divine light flew in front of Ji Tianxing and stopped in the sky, blocking his way. 4 Imperial Guards captains in dark red armor and purple capes stood at the front of the team. They stared coldly at Ji Tianxing. The 400 Imperial Guards held their halberds tightly and arranged themselves in a defensive formation in the sky. They looked at Ji Tianxing cautiously. An invisible murderous aura spread across the sky. Everyone could see that this group of Imperial Guards had a solemn expression. Their eyes were grave, as if they were facing a great enemy. The surrounding God Race citizens vaguely felt that something was wrong and started to discuss secretly. What's going on? Aren't the Imperial Guards usually very arrogant and high above the masses? Why do I feel that the Imperial Guards are very nervous? They look very guilty and can't beat that brat. The Imperial Guards, who have always been arrogant, actually have timid moments? Where did that brat come from? Let's not care about that first. Looking at the aggressive manner of the City Guards, they should be making a move first. Just as expected, thousands of City Guards also arrived. They spread out and surrounded Ji Tianxing from the side. The commander and the 10 captains all took out their divine weapons and stared at Ji Tianxing with murderous intent. They shouted, "How dare you? Surrender now. How dare you barge into the city gate? This is an unforgivable crime. Arrogant brat, if you surrender now, you can die with dignity." The thousands of City Guards were also emotional and hot-blooded. They were ready to pounce on Ji Tianxing at any time and tear him into pieces. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows, and the corners of his mouth curled into a mocking sneer. He looked at the commander and asked, "Don't you know who I am? You rushed here in a hurry just to avenge the trash guarding the city gate?" Hearing this, the City Guard commander and the 10 captains were all stunned, revealing a puzzled expression. Indeed, they had only heard that someone had barged into the city gate and quickly gathered the troops to come to support. They had no time to ask about the specific situation and did not know who had barged into the city gate. Now that they heard Ji Tianxing's words and saw the abnormal reaction of the Imperial Guards, they realized that something was wrong. The white-robed brat in front of them seemed to have a strong background and was not to be trifled with. Just as the City Guard commander was hesitating and wanted to ask for more details, an Imperial Guard captain spoke up. "Commander Lee, this person barged into the city gate and injured nearly 100 City Guards. By right, he should be handed over to the City Guards to be dealt with. However, His Majesty personally ordered us to deal with this matter. So you can go back now. We will deal with this matter." Suddenly hearing this news, the thousands of city guards were stunned and looked incredulous. The thousands of God Clan people on both sides of the road also looked as if they had seen a ghost and exclaimed. Chapter 3199. Oh my God, how could this be? We were right. That white-robed boy has a powerful background. The city guards are not qualified to deal with him. The Imperial Guards have to deal with him. Oh my God, His Majesty the Emperor gave the order personally? Who is that boy? How could he be worthy of the Emperor's attention? The show is getting more exciting. Let's see how the Imperial Guards deal with him. The thousands of Deity Clan citizens who were watching were discussing excitedly. The commander and the 10 captains of the city guards heaved a sigh of relief. They were grateful to the captains of the Imperial Guards. After all, Ji Tianxing was not someone to be trifled with. He must be very powerful. If the city guards were to fight him, they might suffer heavy casualties and cause more chaos in the Imperial City. However, with so many commoners watching them, they couldn't be cowards. Otherwise, they would be humiliated and ridiculed. They would become a joke. Now, the captains of the Imperial Guards stopped them at the right time and gave them a way out. The commander of the city guards quickly came back to his senses and bowed to the 4 captains of the Imperial Guards to express his gratitude. Then, he said in a loud and serious voice, "It is the duty of the city guards to guard the 4 gates of the Imperial City and protect the citizens. This man broke through the gates, and we cannot forgive him. We should arrest him and punish him. However, His Majesty the Emperor has ordered the Imperial Guards to deal with this matter. Naturally, I have to retreat and obey His Majesty the Emperor's order." After that, he led the city guards to retreat 100 steps and made a please gesture to the captains of the Imperial Guards. "My lords, please." The city guards stood at the side and watched from the sidelines. Everyone's attention was focused on the Imperial Guards. The 2 captains of the Imperial Guards walked toward Ji Tianxing. Their expressions were indifferent and their eyes were cold. Countless citizens were wondering if the 2 captains of the Imperial Guards were going to fight. Unexpectedly, the 2 captains of the Imperial Guards stopped 10 steps in front of Ji Tianxing. They cupped their fists and bowed to him. "Greetings, young Master Tianxing." The 2 of them spoke in unison. His Majesty had long guessed that young Master would definitely make a trip to the Imperial City. However, young Master's intentions are unclear. Please come with us. Clearly, the 2 captains of the Imperial Guards had received orders from the Great Yin Emperor and were prepared. As soon as they heard that there was a big battle at the city gate and hundreds of city guards were injured, they guessed that it was Ji Tianxing's doing and hurried over to stop him. After all, apart from him, the god of slaughter, no one in the Imperial Empire dared to act so recklessly. The reason he had come to invite Ji Tianxing was to calm him down and prevent him from going on a killing spree and bringing disaster to the Imperial City. Ji Tianxing naturally understood the Imperial Guard's intentions. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "Since you are here on the Emperor's orders, where are you taking me?" The 2 captains cupped their hands and replied, "Of course we're inviting you to the palace. His Majesty the Emperor wants to see you." Ji Tianxing nodded in satisfaction and said, "All right, lead the way." After saying that, he flew toward the palace under the escort of the Imperial Guards. The group quickly disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind 1,000 city guards and a few thousand onlookers. They were discussing with complicated expressions on their faces. "That's unbelievable. That brat injured the city guards, but nothing happened to him? Is he going to let it go just like that? I can't believe it. His Majesty the Emperor wants to see him personally. Who is he? I heard the captains of the Imperial Guards call him young Master Tianxing. Why haven't I heard of this name before? Which top faction is he from? Young Master Tianxing? Why does this name sound so familiar? I think I've heard of it before. There's a rumor about a god of slaughter who went south and went on a killing spree in the Blood Flame and Raging Flame divine nations. I think his name is Tianxing. What? He's that god of slaughter Tianxing? It should be him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so daring and wouldn't be summoned by His Majesty. Heavens! The god of slaughter is cruel and bloodthirsty. He's extremely dangerous. Why is he in the Imperial City? This is too scary. Why didn't His Majesty the Emperor order to get rid of such a bloodthirsty demon? Why did he summon him personally? What's wrong with this world? Why can't I understand? Following the frenzied discussion, Ji Tianxing's identity was soon revealed. Not only were the commoners surprised, but they were also filled with worry and fear. Even the captains of the city guards and the thousands of city guards were secretly shocked. They felt fear and relief. They had all heard of the legend of the god of slaughter and knew of Ji Tianxing's deeds. In fact, they had received the emperor's order a few days ago to strictly guard the 4 city gates to prevent the god of slaughter from attacking. They didn't expect the god of slaughter to come. Luckily, they didn't act rashly. Otherwise, they would have been slaughtered. Moreover, if they were all killed, the matter would be blown out of proportion and the entire imperial city would be alarmed. By then, not only would their sacrifice not be rewarded, but they would also be charged with a crime. It was scary just thinking about it. The 4 captains of the imperial guards guarded Ji Tianxing on his left and right while the 400 city guards followed behind. A moment later, they arrived at the imperial palace's gates. Although the walls of the imperial palace were not as tall as the city walls, they were sturdier and thicker. The red walls and glazed tiles made the place look grand and majestic. Outside the huge palace gates, 100 city guards were lined up in a row. Ji Tianxing and the others passed through the palace gates. They walked along the straight and wide path and entered the luxurious and vast imperial palace. The imperial palace was huge. It had a radius of 50 miles. There were more than 50,000 people in it. Naturally, there were more than 40,000 maids, servants, and imperial guards. Inside the imperial palace, there were splendid palaces and elegant courtyards everywhere. There were also more than a dozen shining golden pagodas. They passed through many palaces and courtyards. After making many turns, they finally arrived at the core of the imperial palace. When they arrived outside a splendid palace, the 400 imperial guards stopped in their tracks. They lined up in a formation in the plaza outside the palace and waited quietly. The 3 captains of the imperial guards guarded Ji Tianxing. One of them entered the palace to report to the emperor. Ji Tianxing looked at the decorations and decorations of the palace. He knew this was not the imperial court. This must be the place where the emperor of Great Yin dealt with government affairs, rested, and cultivated. Just as he had expected, the captain of the imperial guards came out soon after he entered the palace. He walked up to Ji Tianxing, bowed, and said, "Young Master Tianxing, please come with me. His Majesty is waiting for you in the Great Hall." Then, he led Ji Tianxing up the stairs and into the Great Hall. The light in the spacious Great Hall was dim. Even during the day, the gemstone lamps were still lit. The captain of the imperial guards walked into the Great Hall. He did not dare to look at the emperor as he said respectfully, "Your Majesty, young Master Tianxing is here." After he finished speaking, he bowed and left the Great Hall. The Great Hall fell silent. Ji Tianxing looked around. A deep and dignified male voice rang in the air. "It's just as I expected. You audacious fellow, you still came." Chapter 3200. The man's voice was deep and steady. It was awe-inspiring. If it were an ordinary person, they would have been intimidated by the soul-calming voice and kowtowed immediately. However, Ji Tianxing did not react. He remained standing in the Great Hall with an indifferent expression. He raised his head and looked at the seat of honor, his gaze landing on the wide golden throne. He saw a young man dressed in dark red sitting on the throne. He wore a 5-clawed golden dragon robe and a crown with 9 dragons on his head. He was tall and burly, and his eyes were deep and sharp. He exuded a powerful and domineering aura. This was the current emperor of Great Yin, Yin Yongning. In the dark corner behind him, there was a faint wisp of black mist. It was impossible to see what it was. But Ji Tianxing was able to tell with one look that that wisp of faintly discernible black fog was actually a 9th-stage realm god monarch expert. He must be Yin Yongning's loyal old servant. Or perhaps he's a capable subordinate? He thought to himself, but his expression did not change. He said to Yin Yongning, as expected of Great Yan's emperor, "Your mind is so clear that it's admirable." Yin Yongning raised an eyebrow and said with a faint smile, "Huh? If I don't even have a brain, how can I sit on the throne and control such a huge empire. Tianxing, I've been very kind to you. Are you not even willing to address me as your majesty? Or are you saying that you don't want to be a subject of the great Yin Empire? On the surface, it sounded like Yin Yongning was blaming Ji Tianxing for being arrogant and not knowing how to respect his superiors. However, there was a deeper meaning to his words. He was testing Ji Tianxing to see if Ji Tianxing would submit to him. Was Ji Tianxing disloyal to him? Ji Tianxing smiled and said indifferently, "We both know whether you're being kind or fearful of me. Why do you have to point it out? Moreover, I'm from another race. I'm not a subject of the great Yin Empire." Yin Yongning frowned when he saw how decisive Ji Tianxing's reply was without the slightest hesitation. However, he didn't flare up. Instead, he said expressionlessly, "Tianxing, although you do have some strength, you are indeed impressive. However, you have to know that this is the great Yin Empire. There are many crouching tigers and hidden dragons. The Empire's tens of thousands of years of history is not something you can imagine. It's normal for young people to be arrogant because of their talents. But overconfidence is arrogance, and you'll suffer a great loss." Ji Tianxing smiled again and said indifferently, "You said this because you haven't seen through me completely. What does the strength of the great Yin Empire have to do with me?" Before this, Yin Yongning had been pondering and considering. Ji Tianxing would definitely come to the Imperial City. If he snuck into the Imperial City, he would definitely have other motives. He would most likely cause a huge commotion, so they had to guard against him strictly. But he swaggered into the Imperial City, which was equivalent to announcing to everyone, "I have no other intentions. My goal is very clear. Don't worry." Now that Yin Yongning heard these two sentences again, his brows relaxed, and his heart calmed down a lot. Ji Tianxing's meaning was clear. The strength of the great Yin Empire had nothing to do with me. Anyway, I'm not going to make the great Yin Empire an enemy. Since that was the case, Yin Yongning's heart calmed down a lot. He asked again, "I asked the Imperial Envoy to tell you clearly that the great Yin Empire doesn't welcome you. Why did you come? Did you think that Prince Lien would return to the Imperial City to seek protection after escaping to the great Yin Empire? So, you came to the Imperial City this time to kill him?" When he asked this question, the corners of his mouth curled up in a faint smile. Obviously, he was waiting for Ji Tianxing to nod and give a definite answer. In that case, he could tell the truth and make Ji Tianxing's hopes dashed. Deep in his heart, he really wanted to see Ji Tianxing's disappointed expression after his miscalculation. After all, he was also a confident and arrogant young genius. He couldn't stand Ji Tianxing's arrogance. To his surprise, Ji Tianxing shook his head and said with a playful smile, "You and I both know that Prince Lien is not in the Imperial City. Why do you have to ask? I believe you know better than me where Prince Lien is really hiding." Yin Yongning frowned and asked doubtfully, "Since you're not here to kill him, what are you doing in the Imperial City? As far as I know, this is your first time in the great Yin Empire. You have no relatives or friends here. You don't belong to any faction behind you. Therefore, you have no reason to come to the Imperial City." Before Ji Tianxing came, Yin Yongning had asked Black Flame to investigate and gather information. He had analyzed many times, but he still couldn't figure out why Ji Tianxing came to the Imperial City other than to kill Prince Lien. Ji Tianxing's smile became even more playful. He said, "The 18 neighboring kingdoms have all submitted to the Great Yin Empire. In the north of the Tianbei region, the Great Yin Empire is the overlord. Moreover, the Great Yin Empire has been passed down for more than 30,000 years. It has a very deep foundation." Yin Yongning puffed out his chest and felt a little proud when he heard this. However, Ji Tianxing changed the topic and made a request that made him speechless. Therefore, the Great Yin Empire should know the history of the past tens of thousands of years. Moreover, the Great Yin Empire had the largest collection of history books. "I came to the Imperial City this time to ask for your help. I want to investigate a very important matter and check the Great Yin Empire's book collection." After hearing this, Yin Yongning's eyes widened as he stared at Ji Tianxing in astonishment. He was stunned for a moment before he recovered and asked in disbelief, "You risked being attacked and killed to come to the imperial city just for this matter?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked, "Why? Is there a problem? Or is this very difficult for you? You're not willing to help?" "No, no, no." Yin Yongning hurriedly waved his hands and said, "What's so difficult about this? I just can't believe that you're doing this for such a small matter. Isn't this too much of a fuss? Any imperial official above the 6th rank can enter the imperial palace's book collection and read the books at will. They just need to register." Ji Tianxing waved his hands and explained, "You're mistaken. I'm not talking about the kind of book collection that is open to the public and can be accessed by anyone. I'm talking about the book collection that contains classified information. What I want to investigate is top secret. Previously, I didn't find any relevant clues in the Bloody Flame and Raging Flame divine nations. This time, it was Yin Yongning's turn to wave his hands and refuse without hesitation. "No, don't even think about it. The book collection in the book collection is all top secret. How can I let you read it? Not to mention you. Even if I want to enter the book collection, the pavilion elders will have to register, interrogate, and supervise the whole process." Ji Tianxing was not surprised by this answer at all, and he was prepared for it. He stared at Yin Yongning and said with a faint smile, "What if I insist on entering?" Yin Yongning's face fell immediately. His expression became serious, and his eyes became more serious. "You're serious?" Sword piercing the 9 heavens, sword piercing the 9 heavens. Chapter 32:01. Of course. Ji Tianxing nodded without hesitation. Yin Yongning narrowed his eyes, and his gaze became sharp. He said in a low voice, "For this, you will pay a painful price, even death." Ji Tianxing spread his hands disapprovingly and said indifferently, "At most, I will be surrounded by countless experts and have a great battle. Then, the entire imperial city will be destroyed, and I will more or less be injured." Without waiting for him to finish, Yin Yongning's face turned black, and he angrily slammed his hand on the table. Bang! A muffled sound exploded and reverberated in the hall. The table made of peerless divine jade was smashed into pieces and scattered on the ground. Arrogant. Simply arrogant to the extreme. Yin Yongning was so angry that he laughed. He pointed at Ji Tianxing and scolded, "Boy, your arrogance knows no bounds. I have many experts under my command. If I want to kill you, I only need to flick my finger to turn you into ashes. Is it because I cherish talent and am too kind to you that you are so presumptuous?" Ji Tianxing was still indifferent and said expressionlessly, "Back then, the Emperor of Blood Flame, the Emperor of Raging Flame, and Prince Lian had the same reaction as you. However, you also saw the result. Today, I will leave my words here. You can think about it yourself. If you are confident enough, why don't you try and see if the Imperial City is destroyed first or if I am killed first? Anyway, you have hundreds of monarchs and thousands of Imperial guards lying in ambush around this palace. As long as you give the order, they will pounce over and besiege me." Ji Tianxing was not only confident and arrogant, but he also pointed out Yin Yongning's thoughts. That's right. Before summoning Ji Tianxing, Yin Yongning had secretly set up an ambush. Hundreds of monarchs and thousands of elite imperial guards were lying in ambush around the palace, waiting for orders at any time. Yin Yongning was exposed, but he did not feel embarrassed and quickly calmed down. He took a few deep breaths and suppressed his anger. He stared at Ji Tianxing fiercely and remained silent for a long time. To be honest, he was not convinced and was very angry at Ji Tianxing's arrogance. However, he knew that Ji Tianxing was also a top monarch. Even if all the experts in the palace could kill Ji Tianxing in the end, the palace would be destroyed. However, the price they paid was that the entire palace was razed to the ground. Thousands of imperial guards, ministers, and members of the royal family were killed. The battle would even affect the entire imperial city and turn it into ruins and millions of innocent people. At that time, even if he won the battle and killed Ji Tianxing, he would be disgraced. He would become the laughingstock of the world and the most humiliating emperor of the great Yin Empire. Most importantly, The exploration of the Green Jade Palace had reached a critical juncture. The gates of the Divine Palace could open at any time. At that time, the 50 forces would compete for the right to enter the Divine Palace. The imperial family would definitely be able to enter the palace. However, after the battle with Ji Tianxing, he had lost a lot of his experts. He would not be able to take the lead in the process of exploring the palace. At that thought, Yin Yongning could only force himself to calm down and carefully consider this matter. After thinking for a long time, he could not help but sigh silently in his heart. Sigh? Forget it. I have no enmity with this guy. Why should I fight with him and waste my forces? At that time, Grand Prince Lien will secretly laugh at my misfortune. Even if I can kill this guy, I will have to pay a heavy price and bring shame to the empire. Yin Yongning knew very well that he, the newly appointed emperor, had not yet secured the throne. There were many people with ulterior motives who were always looking for opportunities to remove him from the throne. At such a time, he could not make a big mistake. He had to be careful. Therefore, Yin Yongning made up his mind and said to Ji Tianxing seriously, "Kid, you are very smart, but also very arrogant. You are very lucky. I am in a good mood and have been promoting conciliation and benevolence in recent decades. Therefore, I can forgive your recklessness and help you make a request to the cabinet elders. As for whether the cabinet elders agree to let you in to read the information, it has nothing to do with me." Ji Tianxing immediately nodded and said with a smile, "I am very pleased that you can weigh the pros and cons and make this decision. I thank you." Although it was a thank you, Yin Yongning felt awkward and frowned. "Kid, what do you mean?" Ji Tianxing did not evade and said straightforwardly, "You and I both know that even if you use all the power of the empire to kill me, you will have to pay a heavy price. The great Yin Empire has been powerful for too long, and it is sacred and invincible in the eyes of the people. If I destroy the imperial city and kill millions of people, it will be a great humiliation. You will also bring shame to the imperial family. You have just ascended the throne a few decades ago and still need to use benevolence to win people's hearts and stabilize the situation. If there is chaos, the image that you have painstakingly built will collapse overnight. The people in the empire will also take advantage of the situation and create rumors. Besides, you and I both want to get rid of Prince Lien. There is no need to fight to the death and let Prince Lien sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Most importantly, there's a big matter in the northwest that you are most concerned about and looking forward to. You can't let me affect your plan." When Yin Yongning heard this, his eyes narrowed into slits and flashed with a cold light. His whole body tensed up and he forgot to breathe. He was shocked and angry. At that moment, he really wanted to strangle Ji Tianxing and ask, "How the F***CK do you know so clearly? And the big matter in the northwest, are you referring to the Azure Jade Palace? Despicable bastard, how do you know about the existence of the Azure Jade Palace? Which bastard dared to leak the news?" Yin Yongning roared in his heart, his killing intent boiling. However, he suppressed his anger and killing intent and kept himself calm. After a long time, Yin Yongning suddenly sneered and then laughed loudly. The ancients said that those who live to the end are not necessarily strong, but they're definitely wise. We finally understand why you were able to live until now despite causing so many disasters. Boy, you are good. You are good. Yin Yongning stared at Ji Tianxing, gave him a thumbs up, gritted his teeth, and praised him. Ji Tianxing knew that from this moment on, he and Yin Yongning were enemies. Although Yin Yongning wouldn't do anything to him in the imperial city. But after he leaves the imperial city, it would be hard to say. He didn't care and said with an indifferent expression, "In that case, this matter is settled. You can go and tell the elders." Yin Yongning frowned and said in a cold voice, "My favor is not so easy to return. I can help you, but you must promise that no matter what method you use, you cannot let Prince Lien come back alive. Also, this is a secret that must not be known by others. Otherwise, I will not let you go even if I use all the power of the empire to chase you to the ends of the earth." Chapter 32:02. Yin Yongning agreed to help, but he made a request. Moreover, these words were very sensitive and should not be heard by others. Yin Yongning wanted to get rid of Grand Prince Lian to prevent future trouble. However, he could not do it himself, nor could he let the imperial family do it, lest it affect his reputation. Therefore, he could only rely on external forces. Ji Tianxing was the best candidate. Ji Tianxing agreed to Yin Yongning's request without hesitation. No problem. Even if you didn't ask, I was going to do it. Yin Yongning was very satisfied with Ji Tianxing's answer. He nodded slightly and said, "Very good. It's easy to deal with smart people. I'll go tell the elders now. You can wait here. Go ahead." Ji Tianxing spread out his hands and waited patiently in the hall. Yin Yongning left the hall and rushed to the library to meet the elders. Naturally, the Black Flame Governor, who had transformed into a wisp of black mist, followed behind Yin Yongning. Previously in the hall, the Black Flame Governor had been invisible and restrained himself from saying a word. Now that he had left the hall, the Black Flame Governor could no longer hold back the doubts in his heart and said, "Your Majesty, although I understand your concerns, you are too indulgent of that kid." Yin Yongning's face darkened as he said in a low voice, "Now the investigation of the Green Jade Palace has reached the most critical moment, and there can be no mistakes. Although I am confident that I can kill this kid, I will have to pay a heavy price. The gains do not make up for the losses. Only a wise man can know when to yield and when to stand tall and when to advance and when to retreat." The Black Flame Governor was silent for a moment before he continued. "Even so, you should not have agreed to help him enter the library. Even if you refuse him directly, he will not make a scene in the palace and will leave sensibly." Yin Yongning shook his head and said in a firm tone, "No, you are wrong. He is very sure that there is a library in the palace that collects ancient history books. If I refuse him, he will definitely sneak in by hook or by crook. I can see that this kid is very arrogant and conceited. He does things regardless of the consequences, as if he doesn't know what fear is." After pausing for a moment, he continued, "Furthermore, I only promise to help him ask the pavilion elders. I can't guarantee that he will be able to enter the library pavilion." The Black Flame Governor said with a complicated tone, "But you're the ruler of the empire after all. Once you've given the order, you have to get it done. Otherwise, it will damage the imperial prestige." Yin Yongning laughed self-deprecatingly and said, "Right now, my throne is not stable yet, and I have not completely controlled the entire divine kingdom. Those damned rebels are still looking for opportunities to overthrow me. What vast and mighty imperial might! That was all for outsiders to see. I'm already very sullen as an emperor, so why would I care about prestige?" Since the conversation had reached this point, the Black Flame Governor had nothing else to say. He just sighed. "Sigh. Your Majesty has always been wise and decisive. I hope that you will be right as always and that things will go smoothly." "Definitely," Yin Yongning murmured in a firm tone. Soon, the two of them arrived at the depths of the imperial palace, outside an inconspicuous black palace. This ancient, mottled, and inconspicuous palace was far less magnificent and dazzling than the other palaces. It looked like an abandoned palace that had been in disrepair for a long time, exuding an ancient and vicissitude aura. Yin Yongning walked to the palace gate and said with a solemn expression, "I request to see the 4 pavilion elders." As his dignified voice fell, several figures suddenly appeared outside the originally empty palace gate. They were several elite Imperial Guard powerhouses, and they quickly knelt on one knee and saluted Yin Yongning. Then, the Imperial Guard powerhouses opened the gate, and Yin Yongning stepped in and disappeared into the darkness. The Black Flame Governor, who had transformed into a wisp of black mist, stayed outside the palace gate and waited patiently. Ji Tianxing waited for a full 15 minutes in the hall where Yin Yongning lived. Finally, Yin Yongning returned with the Black Flame Governor. Ji Tianxing quickly looked at Yin Yongning and asked, "How's the situation? Did the pavilion elders agree?" Yin Yongning's expression was somewhat complicated. After hesitating for a moment, he explained, "Tianxing, I have already told the pavilion elders about this. They did not agree, but they did not refuse either. However, You have to follow me to the book collection pavilion. The 4 pavilion elders want to see you, and they might give you some tests. The 4 pavilion elders want to test me. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows, and a playful smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Don't tell me it's another boring challenge and martial arts competition? Yin Yongning frowned and said with some displeasure, If you are afraid, you don't have to go. I have to remind you that the 4 pavilion elders are all top Sir gods who are close to 20,000 years old, and they are very powerful. They have lived in the book collection pavilion for a long time and can be said to be well-read. They know about the past and the present, and they are very knowledgeable. However, their temperaments are a little strange. Yin Yongning told Ji Tianxing the situation, hoping that he would back off. That would make things easier. However, how could Ji Tianxing be scared? He just smiled and said in an indifferent tone, Let's not waste any more time. Take this monarch there now. Yin Yongning frowned again, but did not say anything. He brought him out of the hall and rushed to the book collection pavilion. Not long after, the two of them arrived outside the ancient Black Palace. Yin Yongning walked to the palace door and said in a deep voice, Pavilion elders, I have brought Tianxing here. As his voice fell, the thick and sturdy palace doors slowly opened to both sides. Creak, creak, creak. The door opened a gap, which was only 2 feet wide, just enough for one person to pass through. Yin Yongning looked at Ji Tianxing and said expressionlessly, You can go in. I still have things to deal with, so I will not wait for you. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said with a playful smile, What? You don't want to know the result? Yin Yongning said expressionlessly, Even if the result is out, it will not be done in a short time. Besides, someone will naturally report the result to me. In fact, he already had the answer in his heart and didn't want to wait for the result. In his opinion, the 4 pavilion elders were deliberately making things difficult for Ji Tianxing. Even if Ji Tianxing had great ability, it was impossible for him to pass the test. Failure was inevitable. Since that was the case, why should he waste his time? Ji Tianxing could roughly guess what he was thinking. He just smiled and didn't say anything else. He stepped into the dark hall, and his figure disappeared in the darkness. Bam! The palace door slammed and made a muffled sound. Yin Yongning said expressionlessly, Stay here and report to me as soon as you have the result. After saying this, he turned around and left. The black flame governor complied and turned into a wisp of black mist, staying in place. Chapter 3203. The hall was as dark as ink, cold and deathly still. Ji Tianxing slowly walked toward the center of the hall. At the same time, he released his divine perception to check his surroundings. He had thought that the hall would be filled with bookshelves or that there would be hidden compartments on the walls to store history books. But in reality, the hall was empty. There were no bookshelves or books. There were only 8 pillars that were as thick as a water tank. There was a statue of a god in each of the 4 corners. There was a 100 feet tall altar in the center of the hall. It was made of blood red and black stones and looked a little strange. Ji Tianxing walked towards the altar and carefully observed it without blinking. At this moment, a sinister voice suddenly rang out in the darkness. Keek keek. I've been guarding this place for 10,000 years, and this is the first time I've encountered an outsider. How interesting. Ji Tianxing stopped and turned his head to look behind him. He saw an old woman in a black robe and a black iron mask standing 10 steps away from him. This old woman from the great Yin divine clan had a hunched back. Her fiery red hair was disheveled, and she held a flaming walking stick in her hand. The mask covered her face, and her true appearance could not be seen. However, the eyes under the black iron mask shone with a cold light. She looked as if she was up to no good. Ji Tianxing sized her up expressionlessly to check her cultivation base. Just as Yin Yongning had said, this old woman before him was very powerful. Not only was she a 9th-level divine lord, but her divine power aura was also unfathomable. Her foundation was very deep. Ji Tianxing thought that this black-robed old woman's strength should be among the top 10 in the great Yin Empire. Old woman, how are you going to test me? The black-robed old woman did not speak. However, a low and hoarse old man's voice rang out in the darkness. You're lucky to be able to enter the library, foreign kid. Why are you so impatient instead of cherishing this short period of time? As the voice fell, an old man in a purple robe with disheveled hair and a dirty face appeared behind the black-robed old woman. He was also an old man from the great Yin divine tribe. His body was shriveled, and his face was old and decrepit. His purple robe was wrinkled, and his purple hair was messy. He looked no different from a beggar. However, such a sloppy old man, who looked like he had 1 foot in the grave, possessed a terrifying amount of divine power. His strength realm was the same as the black-robed old woman, both being 9th-level divine lord realm. However, his strength and foundation were superior to the black-robed old woman's. The 2 cabinet elders stood side by side and stared coldly at Ji Tianxing, giving off an extremely oppressive aura. However, Ji Tianxing's expression remained calm, as if he was not affected at all. His tone was calm as he said, "I heard from Yin Yongning that there are 4 pavilion elders. Why don't you all show yourselves? Don't come out one by one. Everyone has to say a few words. What a waste of time." Suddenly hearing these 2 sentences, the black-robed old woman and the purple-robed old man's expressions changed, and their eyes became fierce and ghastly. "Hee hee, one arrogant brat. You've really opened my eyes. You dare to be impudent in the library? You're courting death." At the same time as she shouted angrily, the black-robed old woman suddenly brandished her flaming walking stick, sweeping over towards Ji Tianxing. "Brat, you don't have the qualifications to enter the library. Get out." In an instant, the flaming walking stick released a vast and surging divine fire, sweeping over towards Ji Tianxing. The entire great hall was illuminated by the fiery light. The temperature also became extremely horrifying. It looked like Ji Tianxing was about to be drowned by the blazing divine fire. But he did not panic in the face of danger. Raising both hands unhurriedly, he kneaded a divine art and stabbed towards the black-robed old woman. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In an instant, several dozen streaks of dazzling sword light shot out, carrying a power that could pierce through everything, striking the blazing fire with a loud bang. Bang, bang, bang. A series of muffled bangs erupted, reverberating in the empty great hall. The blazing divine fire that the black-robed old woman fired out was actually sliced into pieces by the sword light, collapsing and dissipating. Not just that, those several dozen streaks of sword light were perfectly preserved, still having 60% of their power remaining. They all stabbed towards the black-robed old woman. Instantly, the black-robed old woman was enveloped by the sword light that filled the sky, falling into a dangerous situation. Seeing this scene, the black-robed old woman's gaze turned cold, and she grinned coldly. "Ha ha, little bastard, you actually have some ability." As she spoke, she brandished her flaming walking stick with all her strength, instantly slashing out several dozen times, smashing all the sword light into pieces. She quickly resolved the crisis, then swiftly retreated, waving the walking stick in her right hand, striking out with a divine art with her left palm, releasing a powerful divine ability to launch an attack. At the same time, the purple-robed old man had already pressed forward, attacking Ji Tianxing with both his fists and feet. On the surface, his offensive moves looked simple and clumsy, and could not be said to be exquisite or pleasing to the eye. But Ji Tianxing could see that the purple-robed old man's offensive moves were simple and unadorned, and had already reached the realm of the great Tao being the simplest. The seemingly ordinary punches and kicks were actually the most perfect and invulnerable moves. Not only were they the most powerful and the most economical, but they also contained the power of several dozen divine Tao laws. Clearly, this purple-robed old man was not simple. Just in time, Ji Tianxing was not afraid, and with a low shout, he also raised both his fists to attack the purple-robed old man. He did not use any divine ability, and only used his lifetime of combat experience combined with simple and unadorned fist techniques to clash head-on with the purple-robed old man. Bang! In the next instant, the 2 people's fists collided, exploding with a loud, dull sound. Incomparably violent power burst forth from the two people's fists, spreading out in all directions. Instantly, the space around the two people violently fluctuated and cracks appeared. The result was also unexpected. Ji Tianxing was shaken back 10 steps, and his figure swayed for a while before he stabilized, his face slightly pale. As for the purple-robed old man, he was actually shaken back, and he rolled and smashed 1,000 feet away. While he was still in midair, he had already opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. No one expected this. The purple-robed old man and Ji Tianxing clashed head-on, and he was actually defeated. He could not even take one move, and he was injured by Ji Tianxing. The purple-robed old man was not the only one who was shocked and in disbelief. The black-robed old woman also looked as if she had seen a ghost, her eyes wide open. How is this possible? While the black-robed old woman was in a daze, Ji Tianxing did not stay idle. His figure flashed, and he teleported in front of the black-robed old woman, lifting his right leg and sweeping it out. Bright golden light shone, and it was as if a divine sword was slashing down, and it was unstoppable. The black-robed old woman came back to her senses and subconsciously held her walking stick in front of her to block. Clang! Ji Tianxing's leg swept the flaming walking stick, and the collision of the two caused a metallic sound that reverberated violently in the main hall. Although the flaming walking stick was a supreme monarch-grade divine artifact, it was not damaged. But the incomparably violent impact sent the black-robed old woman flying 1,000 feet away, and she fell into the darkness. When she staggered to her feet, her body was even more bent, and she was panting violently. Blood also flowed out from under the black iron mask. Chapter 32:04. Before this, the two pavilion elders did not think much of Ji Tianxing. Even though Yin Yongning had told them that Ji Tianxing was powerful and difficult to deal with, they did not think much of it. However, the two pavilion elders did not think much of it. In their opinion, even if a young foreign tribesman had some talent and strength, how powerful could he be? In terms of bloodline and talent, he was definitely not as good as the noble great Yin divines. In terms of age, cultivation time, accumulation of divine power, and foundation, he might not be very powerful. When the two pavilion elders tested Ji Tianxing, they were toying with him like a cat playing with a mouse. After all, they were bored in the library. It was good to have some fun to relieve their boredom. However, they did not expect the results to be so shocking. Both of them had only exchanged 2 moves, and they were already injured by Ji Tianxing. This was an unbelievable miracle. It was too surreal. This should not have happened. However, this was the truth. No matter how much they refused to believe it, they could only accept it and find a way to deal with it. Boy, I've underestimated you before. That's why you had a chance. However, I'm going to use my full strength now. You're going to get lost soon. The black-robed old woman said sinisterly. She channeled all her energy and began to use her ultimate killing move. The purple-robed old man raised his sleeve to wipe the blood off his face. He was not angry or humiliated. Instead, he was excited and thrilled. He stared at Ji Tianxing with a scorching gaze and grinned hideously. "Ha! I've forgotten how many years it's been since I was last injured. You brat, you actually brought me such a pleasant surprise. How wonderful. After being bored in the dark for so many years, I finally have some fun." As he grinned hideously, the purple-robed old man also channeled all his energy. His body burned with towering divine flames. His body expanded rapidly and transformed into a flame giant that was 1,000 feet tall. The flame giant's body was dark gold, as if it was made of gold. Its bald head was shiny, and its limbs were huge. Its muscles were bulging and contained a destructive power. Infinite exploding fist. The golden giant roared and turned into a ball of dazzling golden light as it charged toward Ji Tianxing. 360 punches were thrown in an instant. You want to lose even more thoroughly? This monarch will fulfill your wish. Ji Tianxing did not budge an inch. His fighting spirit was also aroused. He sneered, and with a flash of black light in his right hand, he summoned the sword of burial of heaven and charged at the golden giant. Swish! Swish! He formed a sword with his left hand and used the sky-piercing finger to attack the golden giant. Brandishing the sword of burial of heaven with his right hand, he slashed out hundreds of sword lights, forming a sword net that enveloped the golden giant. Bang! Bang, bang, bang! The heaven-piercing finger collided with the golden fist radiance, resulting in an earth-shattering explosion. Then, the sword radiance and fist radiance that filled the sky collided fiercely, causing a series of loud noises. The two figures collided in the darkness. In an instant, they clashed hundreds of times before quickly separating. The golden giant was sent flying tens of thousands of feet away and fell into the darkness. As for Ji Tianxing, he quickly stabilized himself after retreating 1,000 feet away. Such an outcome caused him to frown and reveal a playful expression. Ha! So it's an alternate space. From the moment I entered the hall, I stepped into a space that they set up in advance. Clearly, the spacious hall around him was not real. It seemed that the dark hall was only 1,000 feet in radius. However, after retreating 1,000 feet, his body passed through the wall of the hall, and he was still in the darkness. The golden giant was sent flying tens of thousands of feet away, and his body was still in the darkness. The surrounding walls and pillars were all illusory. They did not suffer any damage and were still there. Ji Tianxing understood that he had to break through this layer of space or leave this space to return to the first floor of the library. Just as he was thinking to himself, the black-robed old woman charged over. Divine Flame's sky opening strike. The black-robed old woman's body surged with divine flames. She held the dark red divine flame walking stick with both hands and smashed it down fiercely like a spear. She used all her strength and continuously slashed out thousands of flaming giant blades in a breath's time. Countless 100-zhonglong giant sabers intertwined with one another, forming a terrifying saber net that shrouded Ji Tianxing's figure. Ji Tianxing did not dodge at all. He formed a sword seal with his left hand and waved the sword of burial of heaven with his right hand. He used a sword Dao ultimate technique and attacked head-on. Swish! 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 Thousands of sword lights carried the power of laws of wind, fire, divine lightning, and other laws as they violently slashed at the flaming giant blades. With a series of loud booms, the flaming giant blades and sword lights that filled the sky collapsed. Billions of fragments of divine light shot out in all directions, stirring up a destructive storm in the darkness. In the end, the flaming giant blades were all shattered, but there were still hundreds of dazzling sword lights left. They ruthlessly slashed at the black-robed old woman. She hurriedly retreated and waved her walking stick to block the sword lights. Bam! 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 There was a series of muffled sounds, and the black-robed old woman was sent flying again. Ji Tianxing was about to give chase, but the golden giant suppressed his injuries and charged over again. This time, he seemed more excited and violent. He waved his fists and legs with all his strength, sending out fist lights and leg shadows that blotted out the sky. Every fist light and leg shadow contained a destructive power that could suppress everything. The power was very domineering and fierce. Ji Tianxing wanted to end the battle quickly, so he no longer hesitated. He also used the celestial dragon tyrant body and turned into a 300-meter tall golden armored god of war. He held the 80-meter long sword of burial of heaven with both hands and slashed out 500 sword lights with all his strength to clash with the golden giant. Boom! 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 Kacha! Kacha! The sky full of sword lights collided with the fist lights and leg shadows, causing deafening explosions that reverberated in the darkness. The dazzling sword lights kept shattering, and so did the fist lights and leg shadows that filled the sky. The golden giant's attack was neutralized, and it was sent flying by a dozen sword lights. Ji Tianxing hurriedly gave chase and added 2 more sword strikes and a punch. The golden giant flew backward for dozens of miles before falling into the darkness. As soon as he got up from the darkness, he coughed violently, and purple blood spurted out of his mouth and nose. When he got up, his chest and abdomen were caved in, and there were a few horrifying wounds that were bleeding profusely. His injuries were even more severe. Fortunately, the black-robed old woman was entangled with Ji Tianqing again, so he didn't chase after him. Taking advantage of this gap, the golden giant hurriedly channeled his energy to suppress his injuries. After 2 breaths, the black-robed old woman was sent flying again, and her injuries were even more miserable. The golden giant regained his composure and rushed toward Ji Tianqing with a roar, launching a fierce attack. Just like that, the 2 cabinet elders joined forces to besiege Ji Tianqing, and they both gave it their all. Although they took turns to attack Ji Tianqing, they were still no match for him. However, none of them were a match for Ji Tianqing. As long as they fought him head-on, they would definitely be injured by him. As time passed, the 2 cabinet elders' injuries became more and more serious. Therefore, they could only change their strategy and no longer take the initiative to attack. Instead, they wandered in the darkness, avoiding Ji Tianqing's attacks and tangling with him. Even though this was a great humiliation to the 2 of them, they had no choice but to do this. They couldn't admit defeat, right? That would be even more humiliating. Wonderful book house.